The text came at midnight. Just signed the papers to sell Chen Manufacturing. $40 million. Not bad for a company our old man built from scraps. Don't worry, little sister. I'll send you a Christmas card from my new beach house. I stared at Daniel's message, my hands steady as I took a screenshot and added it to my growing collection of evidence. My brother always did love to gloat. My name is Emily Chen, and I was about to teach Daniel a lesson of the difference between inheritance and earned success. The irony was, if he'd bothered to attend any board meetings in the past year instead of jet-setting around Europe on Dad's old yacht, he might have noticed what I'd been building. But Daniel had always been like that, showing up only when it was time to take credit or collect profits. I switched to my email, sending a quick message to our company's CFO. It's time. Activate phase 1. The response came immediately. Already done. He won't know what hit him. 12 hours later, I sat in my office at Chen Manufacturing, watching the morning light filter through the floor-to-ceiling windows. This building, these machines humming in the background, the hundreds of employees arriving for their morning shift. It was all part of our parents' legacy. A legacy Daniel was trying to sell to the highest bidder. Mom and Dad had built this company from nothing after immigrating from China in the 1980s. They started in a tiny garage, Dad handling the engineering while Mom managed the books. By the time they died in a car accident last year, Chen Manufacturing was supplying precision parts to major automotive companies across 3 continents. My phone buzzed, a call from Rachel, my best friend since college and now our head of legal. Emily, you need to see this. Daniel just sent the preliminary sales agreement to the board. The numbers. They're not what he thinks they are. I smiled, opening my laptop. Send it over. The document appeared in my inbox moments later. There it was in black and white. Daniel's grandiose plan to sell our family's company to Titan Industries, a corporate giant known for buying family businesses and stripping them for parts. What my brother hadn't realized was that over the past year, while he was busy spending company money on luxury cars and younger girlfriends, I'd been quietly restructuring everything. Each board meeting he skipped, each document he signed without reading, brought me one step closer to protecting what our parents had built. Did you see page 17? Rachel asked, still on the line. The shared distribution clause? Yes, he still thinks he controls 51% of the company because he's the eldest son. Rachel's laugh was sharp. Should we tell him about the trust conversion? Not yet. Let him figure it out when he tries to close the deal. After hanging up, I walked through the factory floor, greeting employees by name. Unlike Daniel, who couldn't tell a laugh from a drill press, I'd spent every summer here since I was 16, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. Dad used to say, success isn't inherited, it's earned. Daniel never understood that. He thought being the firstborn son entitled him to everything. The company, the respect, the legacy. He'd never bothered to learn the business, assuming it would simply fall into his lap. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Daniel. Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Try not to embarrass yourself when I announce the sale. I typed back, wouldn't miss it. That evening, I met with key members of our management team at my house. The same house where Mom and Dad had hosted countless company celebrations, where they taught me the value of treating employees like family. Everything's in place, reported Mark, our operations manager. The audit records, the trust documents, everything. And the employees? I asked. Sarah from HR smiled. They're ready. Every single one of them signed the statement. I looked around the room at these people who'd worked alongside my parents for decades, who'd watched Daniel's increasingly erratic behavior over the past year with growing concern. Tomorrow's going to be difficult, I said. Are you all sure about this? Mark spoke first, his voice firm. Your parents didn't build this company to have it torn apart by Titan Industries. We're with you. The next morning, I arrived early at the office, watching the sunrise paint the Chen Manufacturing sign in shades of gold. Mom had designed that sign herself, incorporating elements that symbolized both our Chinese heritage and American dreams. At 8:45, Daniel strutted into the building, flanked by representatives from Titan Industries. He'd gotten a haircut, bought a new suit, playing the role of successful businessman for his potential buyers. Emily, he called out, using the nickname he knew I hated. Ready to watch Big Brother make history. I met his smug smile with a calm one of my own. Absolutely. The boardroom filled quickly, company executives, legal representatives, and the Titan Industries team all taking their seats. Daniel stood at the head of the table, practically bouncing with self-importance. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, today marks a new chapter for Chen Manufacturing. I'm pleased to announce that Titan Industries has agreed to purchase our company for $40 million. He paused, clearly expecting applause. None came. The paperwork is ready, he continued, slightly flustered. As majority shareholder and CEO. I'm sorry, I interrupted, standing up, but there seems to be some confusion about that. Daniel's smile flickered. About what? Your position. You're not the CEO, Daniel. You haven't been for 6 months. The room went silent as I pulled out a folder and began distributing documents. What are you talking about? Daniel demanded, his face reddening. Of course I'm the CEO. Dad left me in charge. Dad left you as interim CEO. I corrected, subject to board approval and contingent on your active participation in company management. Would you like to know how many board meetings you've attended in the past year? The Titan Industries representatives were flipping through the documents I handed out, their expressions growing increasingly concerned. These attendance records, one of them said, show Mr. Chen has only been present for 2 out of 24 mandatory meetings. Daniel waved his hand dismissively. That's just paperwork. I own 51% of this company. I can sell it if I want to. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I nodded to Rachel, who stood up. Actually, she said, according to the trust conversion executed by your parents before their death, your shares were contingent on meeting certain management participation requirements you failed to meet. She turned to the Titan Industries team. I'm afraid Mr. Chen no longer has the authority to negotiate this sale. Daniel's face went from red to purple. You're lying. This is impossible. I pulled out one final document, the trust agreement our parents had signed 2 months before their accident. They knew Daniel. They knew you'd try something like this. That's why they put safeguards in place. The Titan Industries representatives were already packing up their briefcases, making polite but hasty excuses. This isn't over, Daniel snarled, pointing at me. You think you can steal my company? No, Daniel. I think I can save our parents' company. There's a difference. As security escorted him from the building, I sat down in our father's old chair, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Phase 1 was complete, but the real work was just beginning. My phone buzzed, a message from Rachel. Ready for Phase 2? I looked out at the factory floor where employees were gathering, waiting to hear what would happen next. They trusted me, supported my plan, believed in my vision for the company's future. Yes, I replied. It's time to show everyone what Chen Manufacturing can really do. The media coverage started the next day. Family drama at Chen Manufacturing. CEO ousted in failed sale attempt. Read the headlines. My phone was flooded with calls from reporters, all wanting to know how the quiet younger sister had outmaneuvered her flashy brother. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the message that had just arrived from Daniel's lawyer. Our client contests the validity of the trust conversion. Prepare for legal action. I forwarded it to Rachel, who responded immediately. Let him try. Your parents made everything ironclad. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. While Daniel waged his legal battle, I concentrated on strengthening the company. Every morning, I arrived before sunrise, just like Dad used to do. Every evening, I was the last to leave, reviewing contracts, meeting with team leaders, learning everything I could about where we could improve. You don't have to do everything yourself, Mark said one night, finding me still at my desk at 9 p.m. That's what got Daniel in trouble, thinking he had to be the one in control of everything. I looked up from the production reports I was reviewing. I'm not trying to control everything. I'm trying to understand everything. There's a difference. And there was. Unlike Daniel, who saw the company as his personal ATM, I saw it as a living thing, thousands of moving parts that had to work together. Every decision affected real people with real families. A month after the failed sale, I called an all-hands meeting in the main factory floor. Hundreds of employees gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Many of you have worked here for decades, I began. You helped my parents build this company from nothing. When they died, my brother saw that legacy as his birthright, but I see it differently. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation, our new company structure. Starting today, Chen Manufacturing is becoming an employee-owned company. Every full-time employee will receive shares, with additional shares available based on years of service. The room erupted in murmurs. This was what I'd been working on for the past year, transforming the company into something that couldn't be sold out from under the people who'd helped build it. My parents believed in building things that last, I continued. Not just machines, but relationships, community, future. That's what we're going to do together. The applause was deafening. In the back of the room, I saw older employees wiping away tears. They'd known my parents, understood exactly what this meant. Later that afternoon, Rachel rushed into my office. Daniel's lawyer just filed an emergency injunction, trying to stop the employee ownership transition. They're requesting a hearing next week. I nodded, already prepared for this. Good. Time to show the judge exactly why we did this. The hearing was set for Tuesday morning. I arrived at the courthouse early, dressed in one of Mom's old suits that I'd tailored. Daniel showed up late, looking disheveled, with an expensive lawyer at his side. This is theft, he declared as soon as the judge asked him to explain his position. My sister has stolen my birthright through legal trickery. I sat quietly as his lawyer presented their case, claiming the trust conversion was invalid, that our parents couldn't have intended to disinherit their son. When it was our turn, Rachel stood up. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence of why the trust conversion was not only valid but necessary. For the next hour, we showed the judge everything. Daniel's absences from board meetings, his misuse of company funds, the trail of poor decisions that had nearly bankrupted us twice. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. We'd like to play a video, Rachel announced, recorded by James and Margaret Chen 6 months before their deaths. Daniel's head snapped up as our parents appeared on the courtroom screen. They were sitting in Dad's study, looking serious but determined. If you're watching this, Dad began, it means Daniel has tried to sell the company. We knew this day might come. Our son has many qualities. But he never understood what we built here isn't just a business. It's a family. Mom spoke next, her voice gentle but firm. Emily, if you're seeing this, it means you've done what we hoped, protected not just the company, but the people who make it work. The trust conversion wasn't about punching your brother. It was about preserving our real legacy. By the time the video ended, Daniel had slumped in his chair, all his bluster gone. The judge took only 15 minutes to make his decision. The trust conversion stands, he declared. Furthermore, Mr. Chen's claims of theft are dismissed with prejudice. Outside the courthouse, Daniel caught up to me. You've ruined everything, he spat. I could have made us rich. I turned to face him, really looking at my brother for the first time in months. We were already rich, Daniel, not just in money, but in what Mom and Dad built. You just never saw it. So that's it? I get nothing. You get exactly what the trust stipulates, a living allowance, contingent on you seeking employment and counseling. The choice is yours. He stormed off, but I noticed his shoulders were slumped, defeated. For the first time, he looked less like the entitled heir and more like a lost son. Back at the factory, the transformation was already underway. Employee owners walked with new purpose, offering suggestions, taking initiative. We landed 3 major new contracts in the first month alone. 6 months later, I stood on the factory floor again, this time celebrating our most profitable quarter ever. The employee ownership program had energized everyone, leading to innovations and efficiencies we never imagined. Your parents would be proud, Mark said, watching the celebrations. They'd be proud of all of us, I replied. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I found an unexpected visitor waiting in the lobby. Emily, Daniel said, I've been in therapy, trying to understand everything. I waited, letting him find the words. I never saw it, what Mom and Dad were really building. I just saw the money, the status. But watching what you've done here, he gestured at the bustling factory beyond the windows. I get it now. What do you want, Daniel? He pulled out a piece of paper, a job application. I want to learn, really learn from the ground up. If you'll let me. I studied my brother's face, seeing something new there, humility, maybe even wisdom. Start Monday, I said. 6 a.m. sharp. You'll work with Mark in operations, learning every machine, every process, no shortcuts. His smile was different now, smaller, but more real. Thank you, Emily. As I watched him leave, I thought about mom and dad, about legacy and learning, about the difference between inheriting something and earning it. The next morning, I arrived at my usual time, before sunrise. The factory was quiet, but not for long. Soon, it would pulse with life, with purpose, with the dreams of hundreds of employee owners working to build something lasting. My phone buzzed, a message from Rachel. "Did you really hire Daniel?" "Everyone deserves a chance to earn their place," I replied. "Even him." And that was the real lesson, wasn't it? Success isn't about what you're given. It's about what you build, who you help along the way, and the legacy you choose to create. Dad used to say every machine in the factory had a story. Now I understood. We all have stories. The trick is making sure they're worth telling.
I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I pulled into the familiar driveway of my childhood home, the Mercedes engine purring to a stop. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years being told I'd never amount to anything, and here I was, about to destroy everything they held dear. My name is Amber, and I'm about to teach my family a lesson they'll never forget. "Darling, you made it!" My mother's shrill voice pierced the air as I stepped out of the car. She rushed forward in her designer dress, arms outstretched for an embrace that felt more like a performance than genuine affection. Behind her, my father stood on the porch, watching with that same disapproving look I'd grown up with. "Hi, Mom," I said, accepting her artificial hug. The scent of her expensive perfume brought back memories of all the times she'd told me I needed to try harder to be more like my brother. Speaking of the golden child, Reginald emerged from the house, looking considerably less polished than usual. His normally pristine appearance showed subtle signs of wear, slightly bloodshot eyes, a barely noticeable tremor in his hands. "Little sister," he called out, his trademark smirk in place. "Still driving that old thing?" I smiled, knowing the old thing cost more than his annual bonus. "It gets me where I need to go." Come inside," my father commanded, barely looking at me. "Your mother's been cooking all day." The house hadn't changed, still filled with photos of Reginald's achievements. His graduation, his first job at the prestigious finance firm, his promotions. The few photos of me were from awkward teenage years, strategically placed in darker corners. "So," my mother started as we settled in the living room, "how's that little internet thing of yours going? Still selling? What was it again?" "It's an e-commerce platform, Mom, and it's going fine." "More than fine. Try 8 figures in revenue last year alone." But they didn't need to know that. Not yet. "Well, that's nice," she said in the same tone she used when describing discount store clothing. "Your brother just closed another major deal, didn't you, Reggie? Tell her about it." Reginald shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "It's not that interesting, Mother." "Don't be modest. He's handling the Peterson account now, biggest client at the firm." My father beamed with pride, then turned to me with a pointed look. "You know, if you'd followed our advice and gone into finance like your brother—" "Dad, please," I interrupted, maintaining my calm. "Let's not start that again." "Your father's just trying to help," my mother chimed in. "We worry about you, sweetheart. Living alone in that tiny apartment, working on your computer all day. It's not too late to make some changes." If they only knew about my penthouse overlooking Central Park. "Where's Violet?" I asked, changing the subject. "I thought she'd be here by now." "Oh, your cousin's running late as usual," my mother sighed. "That girl needs to learn some responsibility. Unlike Reginald, always so punctual, so professional." I watched as Reginald excused himself, heading to the bathroom for the 3rd time in an hour. Nobody else seemed to notice, or maybe they were choosing not to. My phone buzzed, a text from Violet. "Everything's ready for tomorrow. You sure about this?" I typed back quickly. "Absolutely." "Amber, put that phone away," my father snapped. "We're having family time." Family time. Right. Like all those family times when they'd forgotten my school performances, or when they'd emptied my college fund to pay for Reginald's MBA, telling me I could take out loans since I wasn't going anywhere special anyway. "Sorry, Dad," I said sweetly, slipping the phone into my pocket. "Just confirming details for tomorrow's presentation." "Presentation?" my mother asked, suddenly interested. "What presentation?" "Oh, just a little something I've prepared for the family reunion tomorrow. I thought it was time to share what I've been up to these past few years." Reginald returned, looking slightly pale. Our eyes met, and for a moment I saw fear flash across his face. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know what. "Well, isn't that lovely?" my mother said dismissively. Now, who wants to hear about Reginald's new beach house? I smiled and settled back in my chair, letting them ramble on about their precious son's latest achievement. Let them have this moment. Tomorrow, their perfect little world would come crashing down and I would finally have my revenge. The best part? They'd brought it all on themselves. Later that night, I sat in my old bedroom, scrolling through the evidence I'd collected over the past year. My laptop's glow illuminated the space where my childhood dreams had been crushed, one criticism at a time. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "It's open," I called out. Reginald slipped in, closing the door behind him. He looked worse than earlier, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. "Need something?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral while quickly minimizing the windows on my screen. "Look, Amber." He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit from childhood. "About tomorrow? I was wondering what exactly you're planning to present." I leaned back in my chair. "Why so concerned, big brother?" "I'm not. I just—" His hands were shaking more noticeably now. "Things haven't been great at work lately, and I—" "You mean since you lost the Thompson account? Or since you started dipping into client funds to cover your gambling debts?" The color drained from his face. "How did you—" "I know everything, Reg. Everything." I pulled up a document on my screen, turning it toward him. "Including your little visits to that sketchy clinic on 5th Street. Interesting place for a financial advisor to spend so much time, isn't it? You've been following me? I didn't have to. Money leaves trails, brother dear, and you've left quite a few." He collapsed onto my bed, head in his hands. "Please, you can't tell Mom and Dad. They'll what? Finally see their golden boy for who he really is?" I stood up, walking to my window. "Remember when I was 17 and I asked to borrow money for my web development course?" "Amber, that was different." "Different how?" "Oh, right, because Dad said I was wasting my time with internet nonsense, while they paid for your gambling habit disguised as investment losses." A notification popped up on my phone, another 6-figure sale on my platform. I smiled, remembering the years of working late nights, building my business piece by piece while my family mocked my choices. "What do you want?" Reginald asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Money? I can get you money." I laughed. "I made more last month than you do in a year, Reg. I don't need your money. I never did." His head snapped up. "What?" "That little internet thing Mom keeps dismissing, it's worth millions now. But that's not even the best part." I pulled up another file. "Want to know what I found in Dad's records?" "Don't," he pleaded. "Too late. I already know about the fake accounts, the money laundering through his firm. Did you know he's been stealing from his clients for years? Of course you did. You learned from the master, didn't you?" A text from Violet lit up my phone. "Found more dirt on Uncle Marquis. Call me ASAP." "How long have you been planning this?" Reginald asked. "Since the day I overheard Mom and Dad laughing about my cute little website while they planned your surprise Porsche gift. The same day I had to take a bus home because I couldn't afford car repairs." He stood up, desperation clear in his eyes. "We can fix this. Whatever you're planning for tomorrow, we can work something out. Like how you worked something out when I needed help? When I was working 3 jobs to make ends meet, and you told everyone I was just too lazy to find a real career? I was wrong, okay? I admit it. I was wrong about everything." I turned back to my laptop, pulling up the presentation I'd prepared for tomorrow. "You know what's funny? I actually believed in you when we were kids. My big brother, the family success story. Until I realized success meant nothing without integrity." "Please," he tried one last time. "Mom and Dad, this will destroy them." "They destroyed themselves, Reg. I'm just going to show everyone the truth." I walked to my door, opening it. "Now get out, and don't even think about warning them. I have backups of everything." As he slunk out, I noticed his hands were trembling worse than ever. He'd probably be looking for another fix soon. My phone buzzed again. Violet sending documents about Dad's latest fraud scheme. Perfect timing. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. I closed my laptop, lying back on my childhood bed. Above me, glow-in-the-dark stars I'd put up at 12 still clung to the ceiling, back when I believed in wishes and family loyalty. Now I knew better. Sometimes the only way to find justice is to create it yourself. Tomorrow, every star would fall, and with them, My family's carefully constructed facade would crumble to dust. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and my mother's forced cheerfulness. I was checking my emails when she burst into my room without knocking. "Amber, dear, your father and I need to speak with you." Her tone was honey-sweet, always a bad sign. In the kitchen, Dad sat at the head of the table, reading something on his iPad. Reginald was nowhere to be seen. "Sleep well?" Mom asked, pouring coffee I hadn't requested. "Cut to the chase," I said, remaining standing. "What's this about?" Dad put down his iPad, revealing what I'd been expecting, an article about my company's recent valuation. "Care to explain this?" "Looks pretty self-explanatory to me." $200 million? Mom's voice cracked. "Your little website is worth $200 million? 240, actually. That article's a few months old." Dad's face reddened. "And when exactly were you planning to tell us about this?" "I wasn't. We're your parents." Mom slammed her hand on the table. "We raised you, supported you." "Supported me?" I laughed. "Like when you told everyone I was a disappointment? Or when you spent my college fund on Reginald's gambling debts?" "We did what was best for the family," Dad interjected. "Everything we've done has been for this family." "Really? Should we talk about what's best for the family, Dad? Because I have some interesting documents that might change your perspective on that." He paled slightly but pressed on. "As your parents, we have a right to..." "To what? My money? Is that what this is about?" "Don't be dramatic," Mom said. "We're simply saying that as your parents, we deserve to share in your success. After all, we gave you everything." I pulled out my phone, playing a recording from 15 years ago. "That internet nonsense will get you nowhere, Amber. You're embarrassing this family with your silly dreams." Dad's voice, crystal clear through the speaker. "You recorded us?" Mom gasped. "I recorded everything. Every insult, every time you chose Reginald over me, every scheme you plotted. Speaking of which, how's the Peterson account, Dad? Still cooking those books?" His face went from red to white in seconds. "How dare you?" "No, how dare you?" I stepped closer to the table. "You want to talk about family? Let's talk about how I paid for Reginald's rehab last year, anonymously, because heaven forbid anyone know the golden boy had a problem." Mom's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. "What rehab?" "Oh, you didn't know? Funny how secrets work in this family, isn't it?" "Whatever you think you know," Dad started, but I cut him off. "I know everything. Every fraudulent transaction, every covered-up scandal, every lie you've told to maintain your precious reputation." I pulled up another document on my phone. "Want to see the proof? I'm presenting it at the reunion anyway, but I could give you a preview." "You wouldn't dare," Mom whispered. "Try me. Or better yet, try explaining to your country club friends why Dad's firm is under federal investigation. That should make for interesting gossip over tennis." Dad stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. "I could destroy you." "No, Dad, I could destroy you. The only difference is I have proof to back it up." The back door opened and Reginald stumbled in, looking like he hadn't slept. "Perfect timing," I said. "We were just discussing family obligations. Mom and Dad seem to think they deserve a share of my success. What do you think, Reg? Should we tell them about your success stories?" "Amber, please," he mumbled. "Please what? Please keep quiet about the embezzlement, the addiction, the fact that you're one bad day away from losing everything?" Mom started crying, her usual manipulation tactic. "We're your family." "No," I said quietly. "You're people who share my DNA. Family doesn't do what you did to me. Family doesn't tear down dreams or steal futures." "What do you want?" Dad asked, his voice heavy with defeat. "I want you to sit there at the reunion today and watch as everything you built comes crumbling down. I want you to feel what I felt. Powerless, exposed, humiliated." "You'll regret this," he threatened. I headed for the door, pausing only to say, "The only thing I regret is believing in you for so long. See you at the reunion. Don't be late. The show won't wait for you." As I walked out, I heard Mom's sobs and Dad's angry muttering. Reginald called after me, but I didn't turn back. They'd made their choices years ago. Now it was time for them to face the consequences. I met Violet at our old hideout, the small cafe 2 blocks from the house where we'd spent countless hours plotting teenage escapes. She was already waiting, a stack of folders beside her coffee. You look like hell, she said as I slid into the booth. You should see the other guys. I ordered a double espresso. Tell me you have something good. Violet leaned forward, lowering her voice. Better than good. Remember how Uncle Marquis always bragged about landing the Peterson account? The one that made him partner? She pulled out a document, sliding it across the table. More like the one that should have landed him in prison. Look at the signature dates. I scanned the papers, my eyes widening. These are backdated by 3 years. And that's not all. She produced another folder. I found these in my mom's attic. Aunt Poppy's been hiding them for years. Letters from the SEC about suspicious trading patterns. How did you get these? Mom's spring cleaning turned up some interesting skeletons. She was more than happy to share once I told her about Aunt Poppy's comments about her divorce. The waitress brought my coffee, and I took a long sip. This is perfect. But are you sure you want to be involved? They'll know you helped me. Please, Violet scoffed. They've been treating us like second-class citizens for years. Remember my high school graduation? I did. Aunt Poppy had spent the entire ceremony talking about Reginald's internship. Besides, Violet continued, I've got more. You know Patricia? Mom's best friend? Ex-best friend. Turns out Aunt Poppy slept with Patricia's husband right before their divorce. Patricia's been sitting on that information for years, waiting for the right moment. I nearly choked on my coffee. Mom's going to have a meltdown. That's not even the best part. Violet pulled out her phone, showing me a series of text messages. Patricia's been gathering evidence about Uncle Marquise's firm. She used to work in their accounting department. Why didn't she come forward before? Fear, mostly. But when I told her about your plan, Violet grinned. Let's just say she's ready to be a star witness. My phone buzzed, a text from Reginald. We need to talk. Please. Ignore it, Violet said, reading my expression. He made his choices. Did you know he tried to blame his latest embezzlement on his assistant? The one who committed suicide last month? I nodded. The family covered it up, of course. Wouldn't want to tarnish the precious family name. Speaking of family names, Violet pulled out one last document. You might want to see this. It's about your college fund. I read through the paper, my hands shaking with rage. They didn't just spend it on Reginald's gambling. They never even set it up in the first place. They used your social security number to open credit cards instead. The debt's still out there, in your name. The cafe door chimed, and we both looked up to see Patricia walking in. She spotted us and made her way over, her usual elegant composure firmly in place. Ladies, she said, sliding into our booth, I believe we have some matters to discuss. Patricia, I started. You don't have to. Oh, but I do. She pulled out her own folder. Your mother didn't just betray me, Amber. She's been betraying everyone for years. These are copies of loans she took out in other people's names. Friends, family members, even her own sister. Violet whistled low. Aunt Poppy's been busy. Indeed. Patricia's smile was sharp. And I think it's time everyone knew exactly what kind of people they really are. My phone buzzed again, this time from Mom. Whatever you're planning, think about what this will do to the family. They're trying to guilt you, Violet observed. Too late for that. I showed them the guest list for the reunion. Everyone who matters will be there. The country club crowd, Dad's business partners, all the people they've been lying to for years. Perfect audience, Patricia said. And I took the liberty of inviting a few special guests, including Thomas from the SEC. He's very interested in your father's creative accounting. You really want to do this? I asked her. There's no going back. Patricia's eyes hardened. Your mother destroyed my marriage, smiled to my face for years knowing what she'd done, and then had the audacity to blame me for not keeping my husband happy. Yes, I want to do this. Violet raised her coffee cup. To karma. To justice, Patricia added. I looked at my phone one last time. 3 missed calls from Reginald, 2 from Dad, and a text from Mom asking to discuss terms. To truth, I said, clinking my cup against theirs. And to family, the real kind. The country club's grand ballroom buzzed with pre-reunion activity as I set up my presentation. Violet helped me connect the laptop while Patricia strategically placed hidden recorders around the room. Testing, testing, I whispered into my lapel microphone. Violet gave me a thumbs up from the sound booth. Your brother's here, Patricia announced, peering through the window. And he looks unstable. I watched Reginald pace the parking lot, repeatedly checking his phone. His expensive suit couldn't hide the tremors or the sweat on his forehead. Amber! My mother's voice echoed through the ballroom. She rushed toward me, designer heels clicking against the marble floor. We need to talk, now. We're past talking, Mom. $1 million, she blurted out. Your father and I will give you $1 million to stop this nonsense. I laughed. With what money? The money you stole from Mrs. Rodriguez? Or maybe from Dad's pension fund scam? Her face whitened. How did you know about Mrs. Rodriguez? Your elderly neighbor who trusted you to manage her retirement? The one who now lives in a studio apartment because you emptied her accounts? That's not... We were going to pay her back. Like you paid back all the others? I turned to the screen, pulling up a spreadsheet. 23 victims, Mom. 23 people who trusted their money to Dad's firm while you both lived large on their life savings. We did what we had to do, she hissed, to maintain our position, to give you children. To give Reginald everything and me nothing? I clicked through more documents. Here's my favorite part. The trust fund you told everyone you set up for me? The one that supposedly proved what wonderful, providing parents you were? Show me where it is, Mom. Show me one proof it ever existed. The ballroom doors opened again as guests started arriving. Mom's social mask slipped instantly into place, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Please, don't do this to us. Think about your father's reputation. Should have thought about that before he forged my signature on those credit cards. Dad appeared behind her, his face stormy. Last chance, Amber. Stop this now or what? I stepped closer. You'll disown me? Cut me off? Pretty hard to do when I'm worth more than your entire firm. You ungrateful little... Everything ready? Violet interrupted, appearing at my side. Almost, I said, just waiting for our special guest. Special guest? Mom's eyes darted around the room. Who else did you invite? As if on cue, Thomas from the SEC walked in, accompanied by two serious-looking men in suits. Dad's face went from red to gray in seconds. You didn't, he whispered. Oh, but I did. And look, there's Mrs. Rodriguez herself. Violet was kind enough to send her an invitation. Should we ask her about her retirement fund, Dad? More guests filtered in. The country club crowd, Dad's business partners, all the people they'd been deceiving for years. Reginald finally stumbled in, making a beeline for the bar. 10 minutes until showtime, Violet announced cheerfully. Stop this. Mom pleaded one last time. We're your parents. Parents? I pulled up the first slide of my presentation. Parents don't steal their child's identity. Parents don't mock their daughter's dreams while enabling their son's addictions. Parents don't destroy innocent people's lives to maintain their social status. I have contacts, Dad threatened. I can make sure you never do business in this town again. Good thing my business is worldwide then. I nodded to Violet, who dimmed the lights. You might want to find your seats. The show's about to begin. They retreated, huddling together at a front table. Reginald joined them, clutching a whiskey glass with shaking hands. Around them, the room filled with all the people they'd spent years impressing, deceiving, and stealing from. Patricia positioned herself near the emergency exit, phone ready to record everything. Thomas from the SEC sat with his colleagues, files open on the table before them. Ready? Violet asked, her finger hovering over the computer's spacebar. I looked at my family, really looked at them. Mom's perfect makeup couldn't hide her fear. Dad's commanding presence had shrunk to desperate glances at the exits. Reginald could barely sit still, probably needing another fix. For a moment, I saw them as they once were in my childhood eyes. Larger than life, untouchable, perfect. Then I remembered Mrs. Rodriguez's tears, the assistant's suicide, all the lives they'd ruined while maintaining their facade of respectability. Ready, I said, stepping up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I have quite a story to tell you about my family. The first slide appeared on the screen, and the gasps began. There was no going back now. Let's start with a story about trust. I began, clicking to the first document. Mrs. Rodriguez, would you mind standing up? The elderly woman rose slowly, supported by her daughter. The room fell silent. Mrs. Rodriguez trusted my parents with her life savings, 40 years of hard work. Would you like to tell everyone what happened to that money, Mom? No? Then I will. The screen displayed bank statements, transfers, forged signatures. Each click of the presentation brought new gasps from the audience. $2.5 million, I announced, transferred gradually into offshore accounts under my father's control. Money that was supposed to fund Mrs. Rodriguez's retirement, her grandchildren's education, her late husband's medical bills. This is slander. Dad stood up, his voice shaking. I'll sue you for what? Telling the truth? I clicked to the next slide. Speaking of truth, let's talk about the Peterson account. Mr. Peterson, I believe you're here tonight. A distinguished man in the back straightened up, his expression darkening as numbers filled the screen. These documents show how my father's firm has been systematically embezzling from your company's pension fund. The signatures are forged, the dates are altered, and the money... I paused for effect. Well, some of it went to cover my brother's gambling debts. Reginald lunged for the door, but Thomas's colleagues blocked his path. Sit down, Mr. Montgomery, Thomas called out. We have some questions about those transactions. Mom grabbed Dad's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. Do something. Oh, we're just getting started, I continued. Let's talk about identity theft, specifically how my parents opened multiple credit cards in my name when I was still a minor. The projector displayed credit card statements, loan applications, all bearing my forged signature. While they were telling everyone about my trust fund, which never existed, they were actually destroying my credit score before I could even vote. Patricia stood up next. If I may, Amber, I have something to add. Mom's face went ashen. Patricia, please. Your best friend for 20 years, wasn't I, Poppy? Patricia's voice carried across the silent room. Tell them why we really stopped speaking. Tell them about Robert. This is private business, Mom sputtered. Like the private business of sleeping with my husband? Or the private business of stealing from your own sister? More documents appeared on screen, loans taken out in various names, all traced back to my parents' accounts. You see, I addressed the stunned audience, this isn't just about money. It's about a lifetime of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. Reginald suddenly stood up, swaying slightly. I need to say something. Sit down, Dad hissed. No, I'm done covering for you. Reginald turned to face the crowd. Everything she's saying is true. I helped hide the evidence, helped cook the books. Dad said it was for the family, but it was really for his reputation, his social status. You ungrateful. Dad started toward him, but Thomas's agent stepped forward. Mr. Montgomery, I suggest you remain seated. We have some serious matters to discuss. The room erupted in whispers. I could see Mrs. Rodriguez crying softly, her daughter comforting her. Mr. Peterson was already on his phone, presumably calling his lawyers. One last thing, I said, pulling up the final slides. These are records of every transaction, every fraud, every lie. Copies have been sent to the SEC, the FBI, and every victim's lawyer. It's over. Mom collapsed into her chair, her perfect facade crumbling. Dad stared straight ahead, his empire disintegrating before his eyes. You've destroyed this family, he said quietly. No, Dad, you did that yourself. I'm just turning on the lights. Violet appeared at my side with a stack of folders. The SEC would like to speak with you and Mom in private, and the police are here for Reginald. Something about outstanding warrants. As the authorities moved in, the room descended into chaos. Country club members hurried out, whispering frantically into phones. Business partners huddled with their lawyers. Mrs. Rodriguez approached my parents, years of pain evident in her eyes. I trusted you, she said simply. I trusted you with everything I had. Mom couldn't even look at her. I watched as my family was escorted out, Dad and Mom with the SEC, Reginald with the police. They looked smaller somehow, stripped of their pretenses and power. Patricia touched my arm gently. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted, but I'm better than I was yesterday. Through the window, I could see reporters arriving, drawn by the scandal. Tomorrow, everyone would know the truth about the perfect Montgomery family. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. The next morning's headlines screamed across every local paper. Prominent financial advisor arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. I sat in my hotel room, watching the morning news coverage with Violet and Patricia. My parents' faces flashed across the screen as they were led out of the police station after posting bail. Turn it up, Violet said, leaning forward. Sources say the fraud spans over 2 decades, the reporter announced. Multiple victims have come forward, including prominent business leaders and elderly retirees. The SEC estimates losses could exceed $50 million. My phone rang. Reginald's lawyer. Hello? Ms. Montgomery, your brother would like to speak with you. He's agreed to cooperate fully with authorities, but he's asking for your help. I put the phone on speaker. With what? Rehabilitation. He says you helped him before anonymously. He's ready to get clean for real this time. Patricia raised an eyebrow. I covered the phone. What do you think? He did come clean at the reunion, she whispered. That took guts. I uncovered the phone. Tell him I'll help with rehab, but only if he makes full restitution to everyone he hurt, including his former assistant's family. Agreed. And he wanted me to tell you he's sorry for everything. After hanging up, I turned back to the TV. They were interviewing Mrs. Rodriguez now. They were my friends, she said, tears in her eyes. I trusted them with my husband's life insurance, with everything we'd saved. Now I'm working part-time at 72 just to afford my medication. Violet squeezed my hand. You did the right thing. A sharp knock at the door made us all jump. Patricia opened it to find my mother standing there, looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. 5 minutes, she said. Please. I nodded and she entered, refusing the seat Violet offered. Your father's firm is finished, she said without preamble. The house is being seized. Our accounts are frozen. Everything we built. Everything you stole, I corrected. Yes. She seemed to deflate. Everything we stole. The country club has revoked our membership. Our friends won't take my calls. Even your aunt, my own sister, has filed charges for identity theft. What do you want, Mom? I want to understand. Why now? Why like this? You could have confronted us privately. Like you confronted Mrs. Rodriguez privately? Or Reginald's assistant before she died? How many lives did you destroy privately, Mom? She flinched. We never meant for anyone to get hurt. Really? What did you think would happen when you stole people's life savings? When you forged their signatures and emptied their accounts? We were protecting our status, our reputation. Your lies? I interrupted. You were protecting your lies, and now everyone knows the truth. She moved to the window, staring out at the reporters still camped in the parking lot. Your father's talking about divorce. Says he needs to protect what assets he has left. Shocking. A man who'd steal from the elderly would abandon his wife to save himself. I deserve that, she whispered. I deserve all of this. But Amber, you're still my daughter. No, Mom. I stopped being your daughter the day you chose your social status over my future. The day you stole my identity instead of believing in me. My phone buzzed, a text from Thomas. Federal indictments coming tomorrow. Thought you should know. They're going to arrest your father again, Mom said, reading my expression. Aren't they? I nodded. She straightened her shoulders, some of her old poise returning. I should go. I need to pack what they'll let me keep. At the door, she paused. For what it's worth, I am proud of you. Not for this, but for what you built on your own. The daughter I failed to see became the woman I couldn't imagine being. After she left, Patricia broke the silence. Well, that was unexpected. She's still manipulating, Violet said, playing the victim. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe she's finally seeing herself clearly for the first time. My phone buzzed again. Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter. Mom wants to know if you'll join us for dinner tonight. She says she'd like to thank you properly. As I typed my reply, I could hear more reporters arriving outside. Tomorrow would bring federal charges, more revelations, more consequences. But for now, I had dinner plans with people who understood the true meaning of family. Coming to dinner? I asked Violet and Patricia. They both nodded, and we gathered our things. As we left the hotel through a side door, I caught one last glimpse of the news vans, their cameras ready to capture the next chapter of the Montgomery family's fall from grace. But that wasn't my story anymore. I had a different kind of family now, one built on truth, not lies. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters as my father was led out in handcuffs. 15 years for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Mom got 8 years in a separate trial with additional charges pending. I watched from across the street, remembering all the times they'd stood on those same steps, proud and untouchable, looking down on everyone else. Ready to go? Violet asked, keys in hand. Almost. There's one more thing I need to do. We drove to the rehabilitation center where Reginald was completing his 90-day program. He looked healthier now, clear-eyed, steady hands. I didn't expect you to come, he said as we sat in the garden. Wasn't sure I would. I handed him an envelope. Your assistant's family agreed to meet with you once you're ready. They want to hear the truth about what happened. He took the envelope with trembling fingers. I wrote them a letter, but it wasn't enough. Nothing will be enough, but the truth is a start. The trust fund money, he said suddenly. The one that was supposed to be yours. I found out where Dad hid it. I leaned forward. What? It did exist, originally. But Dad moved it through shell companies, then used it as collateral for loans. I have all the documentation. The lawyers think they can recover most of it. I don't need the money. I know. He smiled weakly. But Mrs. Rodriguez does. And the others. Understanding dawned. You want to use it for restitution. It's not enough to cover everything, but... He shrugged. It's a start, like you said. My phone buzzed. Mrs. Rodriguez was calling. I'd been helping her navigate the legal proceedings, and somewhere along the way, she'd become like the grandmother I never had. She's making dinner tonight, I told Reginald. Her famous paella. You should come once you're out of here. You'd want that? Want? No, but maybe we both need it. Back in the car, Violet handed me a newspaper. The business section featured my company's latest charitable initiative, a foundation helping victims of financial fraud rebuild their lives. Patricia called, she said. The support group is taking off. 10 new members just this week. I thought about those meetings, where people shared stories of betrayal and recovery. Mom's sister was there sometimes, working through her own healing. Even some of Dad's former business partners attended, though they sat in the back, still processing their unwitting role in his schemes. Did you see this? Violet showed me her phone, a social media post from one of the country club members. Privilege isn't a shield from consequences. Money isn't a substitute for morality. Thank you, Amber, for showing us the truth. We pulled up to Mrs. Rodriguez's modest apartment building. Through the window, I could see her setting the table, Patricia helping with dishes. They waved us up. Before we go in, Violet said, there's something you should know. The federal investigators found more evidence. Dad was stealing long before you were born. This was never about providing for family. It was always about power. I know. I grabbed the container of dessert from the back seat, but that's his legacy, not mine. Upstairs, Mrs. Rodriguez hugged me tight. My angel, she called me, like always. The apartment was small but warm, filled with photos of her real treasure, family, friends, love. I made flan, I said, placing the dessert on her counter. But first, look. She proudly showed me her new lease. She'd be moving to a better apartment next month, thanks to the first restitution payments. As we gathered around her table, I looked at these people who'd become my true family. Patricia, who'd turned her pain into purpose. Violet, who'd stood by me when standing up was hardest. Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd lost everything but kept her heart open. A toast, Patricia raised her glass. To truth. To justice, Violet added. To family, Mrs. Rodriguez said, squeezing my hand. I thought about Reginald, trying to rebuild himself. About Mom and Dad, facing the consequences of their choices. About all the lives touched by their actions and my response. To healing, I said, raising my glass, and to choosing who we become. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. Somewhere, reporters were still telling our story. Lawyers were still untangling decades of fraud. People were still recovering, still healing, still learning to trust again. But here, in this moment, surrounded by genuine love and honest hearts, I was exactly where I needed to be. Now, Mrs. Rodriguez announced, bringing out her paella, we eat, we laugh, we live. That's what real family does. And she was right. That's exactly what we did.
The whispers started at my wedding. I could hear them between the clinks of champagne glasses and forced laughter. Gold digger, trophy wife, daddy issues. I'm Layla, and at 32, I married the love of my life, who happened to be 35 years my senior. The judgment in people's eyes burned, but Charles' warm hand in mine was all that mattered. Did you see her dress? Probably cost more than my car. I overheard Harvey mutter to Sterling during our garden party 6 months later. The brothers huddled near the fountain, pretending to admire the roses Charles and I had planted together. "Dad's lost his mind," Riker chimed in, swirling his whiskey. "She's barely older than us." I busied myself arranging appetizers, pretending not to notice. Charles appeared behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "They'll come around, my dear," he whispered, but his voice carried the same wheeze that had been worrying me for weeks. "Charles, maybe you should sit down. You're looking pale." I guided him to a nearby chair, earning eye rolls from his sons. "Playing nurse already?" Riker approached, his designer shoes crushing our freshly laid mulch. "Practicing for when he's bedridden?" "That's enough." Charles's voice, though weakened, still commanded respect. "Layla is my wife, and you will treat her accordingly." The party continued with artificial pleasantries, but I couldn't shake the chill of Riker's words. Later that evening, I found Charles in his study, reviewing documents with Patricia, his lawyer and longtime friend. Everything's in order," Patricia assured him, catching my eye with a knowing smile. "The video recording is complete, and the papers are filed." "Video recording?" I asked, setting down Charles' evening tea. Charles reached for my hand. "Just ensuring our future is secure, my love. You know how particular I am about details." A coughing fit seized him, and I rushed to his side with water. Through the study's window, I spotted Riker and Harvey in intense conversation by their cars, heads bent together like conspirators. "I don't trust them," Yvonne, my best friend, said later that night over the phone. "The way they look at you, Layla, it's predatory." "Charles trusts me," I replied, watching him sleep peacefully beside me. That's all that matters. But the next morning, I discovered a printed email in Charles's printer tray. It was from Riker to his brothers. "We need to act soon. Dad's health is declining faster than expected. That little gold digger won't know what hit her." My hands trembled as I read it. Charles stirred in his sleep, and I quickly tucked the email into my drawer. The man I loved was dying. I could see it in his increasingly fragile movements, hear it in his labored breathing. His sons were circling like vultures, but I wouldn't let them destroy what we had built. "I made an appointment with Dr. Matthews," I told Charles over breakfast. "Your cough is getting worse." "Ha, always taking care of me," he smiled, reaching across the table. His hand trembled slightly. "That's why I fell in love with you, Layla. Your heart." Sterling appeared in the doorway, his expression darkening at our intimate moment. "The board meeting starts in an hour, Dad, if you're feeling up to it." "Of course." Charles stood, swaying slightly. I steadied him, earning a glare from Sterling. "I can drive you," I offered. "He doesn't need a babysitter," Sterling snapped. "No, but I'd like my wife's company." Charles kissed my cheek, and we left Sterling seething in the doorway. In the car, Charles's breathing grew more labored. "Promise me something," he said, taking my hand. "Promise you'll stay strong, no matter what happens." "Charles, don't—" "Promise me, Layla. They'll try to break you, but you're stronger than they know. Patricia has everything ready." I squeezed his hand, fighting back tears. "I promise." That evening, I overheard the brothers in Charles's study. "The will reading will be our chance," Harvey was saying. "She won't see it coming." I pressed my back against the wall, heart pounding. They were planning something, but what? Charles's words echoed in my mind. "You're stronger than they know." Little did they realize, their father had prepared for this very moment. As I watched them leave the study, heads held high with unearned confidence, I thought about the video Patricia mentioned. Whatever storm was coming, I would weather it, not just for myself, but for the man who saw past the whispers and loved me for who I really was. The call came at 3:47 a.m. Charles had been struggling to breathe, and I'd finally convinced him to let me take him to the hospital. I held his hand as the machines beeped around us, their rhythm a countdown I wasn't ready to accept. "I love you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Remember what we discussed." Those were his last words. The flatline tone pierced the quiet room, and my world collapsed. I barely registered the nurses rushing in or being guided to the hallway. My husband was gone. Well, isn't this convenient? Riker's voice cut through my grief hours later. He stood in the hospital corridor, Harvey and Sterling flanking him like bodyguards. Alone with him when it happened. Don't you dare, I warned, my voice raw from crying. Don't you dare make this about money right now. Everything's about money with you, isn't it? Sterling sneered. Patricia arrived before I could respond, her heels clicking purposefully down the hallway. Boys, this is hardly the time or place. Your father just passed away. Our father, Harvey emphasized, whom she manipulated until his dying breath. 3 days later, we gathered at the house for what was supposed to be a family dinner before the funeral. The tension could have been cut with a knife. When's the will reading? Riker demanded, stabbing at his untouched steak. Your father's body isn't even cold, Patricia responded sharply. She'd stayed close since Charles's death, a buffer between me and the brothers' increasing hostility. We have a right to know our inheritance, Harvey insisted, especially given the circumstances of his marriage. I set down my fork. The circumstances being that I loved him? Oh, please, Sterling laughed coldly. You loved his bank account. We all know it. The question is, how much did you manage to squeeze out of him before the end? That's enough. My brother Micah stood up so quickly, his chair toppled backward. My sister just lost her husband. Show some respect. Respect? Riker scoffed. Like she showed respect marrying our father when she's barely older than us? I pushed away from the table, my hands shaking. In Charles' study, I found myself drawn to his desk. The familiar scent of his cologne still lingered. Opening the top drawer, I found an envelope with my name written in his distinctive handwriting. Finding more assets to claim? Sterling's voice made me jump. He stood in the doorway, watching me with undisguised contempt. Get out, I said quietly, clutching the envelope. This is our father's house. You're the one who needs to get out. Actually, Patricia appeared behind him. This is still Layla's house, at least until the will reading. I suggest you remember that. After they left, I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single note. My dearest Layla, when the storm comes, remember the video. Trust Patricia. All my love, Charles. The video. The one they'd recorded in the study. What had Charles planned? They're going to try to take everything, Yvonne said later that night, sitting with me in the kitchen. You know that, right? Let them try. I pulled out Charles's note. He knew this would happen. He prepared for it. Mrs. Wright? Our housekeeper appeared in the doorway. Mr. Riker is in the garage, going through Mr. Charles's files. I found him rifling through cabinets, papers scattered everywhere. Looking for something? He didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Just collecting what's mine. Nothing is yours yet, I reminded him. The will reading isn't until tomorrow. You really think you've won, don't you? He stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his height. Think you've secured your future by seducing an old man. I loved your father, I said firmly. Something you clearly know nothing about. Love? He laughed. Tomorrow you'll learn what really matters in this family. And it isn't love. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept reading Charles's note, thinking about the video he'd mentioned. Whatever was on it had given him confidence in my future. But his sons were ruthless, determined to paint me as a gold digger who'd taken advantage of their father. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Everything's ready for tomorrow. Charles made sure you'd be protected. Get some rest. I touched the empty side of the bed, where Charles should have been. I promise I won't let them win, I whispered to the darkness. Whatever you planned, I'll see it through. The will reading was set for 10 a.m. In less than 12 hours, I'd find out exactly what Charles had done to protect me from his son's greed. And something told me they weren't going to like it one bit. Patricia's office felt smaller, with all of us crammed inside. Riker lounged in a leather chair like he already owned the place, while Harvey and Sterling stood near the window, whispering. My brother Micah sat beside me, his presence steadying. "Before we begin," Patricia said, arranging documents on her desk, "there's a video message from Charles that he wanted played first." "A video?" Harvey straightened. "That wasn't mentioned before." "There's a lot you don't know," Patricia replied coolly, reaching for her laptop. "Wait," Riker interrupted. "We should have our lawyer present for this." "Your father's instructions were explicit," Patricia said. "Just family and myself. If you'd prefer to leave—" "Play it," I said quietly. My heart hammered against my ribs as Patricia connected her laptop to the wall-mounted screen. "This is ridiculous," Sterling muttered. She probably coerced him into making this video when he wasn't thinking clearly. "Your father was of sound mind until the end," Patricia snapped, "as his medical records will attest." The screen flickered to life, and there was Charles, sitting in his study. He looked healthy in the video, recorded just 2 months ago. My throat tightened at the sight of him. If you're watching this," he began, "I'm no longer with you, and I imagine my sons are already circling like sharks." Riker shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I've watched you boys," Charles continued. "Watched how you've treated Layla from the day I introduced her. Your contempt, your assumptions, your cruel whispers when you thought I couldn't hear. But I heard everything." Harvey's face reddened. Sterling looked away. "You see, I've made some decisions about my estate that you might not expect." Charles leaned forward in the video. "But before that, let me tell you a story about your inheritance." "What inheritance?" Riker interrupted. "Can we skip to the actual will?" "Quiet," Patricia commanded. On screen, Charles pulled out 3 folders. "These contain records of every loan I've given each of you. Riker, your failed tech startups. Harvey, your gambling debts. Sterling, your string of bad investments. I covered everything, hoping you'd learn from your mistakes. You didn't." The brothers exchanged panicked looks. "Instead," Charles continued, "you directed your bitterness at Layla, convinced she was after my money. The irony isn't lost on me." My brother squeezed my hand as tears rolled down my cheeks. "Now, about my estate." Charles opened another folder. "Patricia, please distribute the documents." Patricia handed each brother a thick envelope. Their hands shook as they opened them. "These are loan repayment schedules," Charles explained. "Every penny I've given you over the years, with interest, due immediately upon my death." "This is insane!" Harvey exploded, papers scattering across the floor. "He can't do this." "He can, and he did," Patricia said calmly. "Keep watching." "Layla," Charles's voice softened. "My love, open the locked drawer in my study desk. The key is with Patricia." Patricia handed me a small silver key. "We can pause." "No," I said firmly. "Let it play." "In that drawer," Charles continued, "you'll find documentation of every charitable foundation I've established in your name. While my sons were borrowing millions, you were helping me plan homeless shelters and scholarship programs. That's the difference between greed and love." Riker stood up so fast, his chair toppled backward. "This is fraud. She manipulated him." "Sit down," Patricia ordered. "We're not finished." As for my actual estate," Charles said, "I've left specific instructions with Patricia. But know this, those who showed kindness will find kindness in return. Those who showed only greed," he shrugged, "well, karma has a way of balancing the scales." The video ended. Silence filled the room. "This isn't over," Sterling threatened, pointing at me. "We'll contest it." "You're welcome to try," Patricia said, pulling out more documents. "Your father made everything legally binding, including those loan repayments." "You planned this," Harvey accused me. "You turned him against us." "No," I stood up, finding strength in Charles's recorded words. "You did that all by yourselves." "The estate details," Patricia continued over their protests, "will be disclosed once Layla opens that drawer. Shall we head to the house?" As we left Patricia's office, I caught Riker making a furious phone call, probably to his lawyer. Harvey looked shell-shocked, while Sterling kept rereading his loan documents in disbelief. "You okay?" Micah asked quietly as we walked to our cars. I nodded, clutching the small silver key. Charles knew exactly what he was doing. He protected me in the best way possible, by letting them reveal who they truly are. The drive back to the house felt like the calm before a storm. Whatever waited in that locked drawer, I knew one thing for certain. Charles had just turned his son's greed into their downfall. The study still smelled like Charles. Standing before his desk, memories flooded back. Late nights discussing charity projects, morning coffee while he read the paper, stolen kisses between meetings. The silver key felt heavy in my hand. "Get on with it," Riker demanded from the doorway. His lawyer had arrived, a sharp-faced woman who kept checking her phone. "This is a private moment," Micah stepped between us. "Private? In our father's house?" Sterling scoffed. Patricia cleared her throat. "Actually, about that ownership claim." She pulled out another document. "Charles transferred the house deed to Layla 3 months ago." "He what?" Harvey snatched the paper. "This can't be legal." "Completely legal," Patricia smiled. "Now, shall we proceed?" My hands trembled as I inserted the key into the drawer. Inside lay a leather portfolio and a USB drive labeled "Watch Me First." "Another video?" Sterling groaned. "How many recordings did he make?" Patricia connected the USB to Charles's laptop. The screen flickered, showing Charles and me in this very study exactly 1 year ago. "Is this recording?" Charles asked someone off-screen. Then to me, "Layla, darling, tell me again about your idea for the women's shelter." I watched myself sit forward eagerly. The statistics show that financial dependency keeps women in dangerous situations. If we could provide not just housing, but job training, childcare. See how her eyes light up when discussing helping others? Charles turned to the camera. Not money, not status, just genuine desire to make a difference. Riker made a disgusted sound. "Turn it off. This proves nothing." "Keep watching," Patricia insisted. The video showed multiple clips spanning months. Me organizing fundraisers, visiting construction sites for the shelters, meeting with social workers. Charles narrating throughout, documenting my involvement in his charitable works. "Why are we watching this?" Harvey demanded. "Because," Charles's voice grew stronger, "this proves Layla's character. Every decision she helped make, every project she championed, was about helping others. While you three," he sighed, "well, let's review your contributions." The video shifted to security footage. Riker arguing with Charles about another failed startup. Harvey begging to cover gambling debts. Sterling demanding money for a sure-thing investment. "Turn it off!" Riker lunged for the laptop, but Micah blocked him. "That's enough!" The lawyer finally spoke up. "This video seems deliberately edited to show the truth," Patricia finished. "Now, Layla, the portfolio, please." Inside were detailed records of every charitable foundation Charles had established, with me listed as executive director. But there was more. Documentation of every loan his sons had taken, every failure they'd hidden, every scheme they'd attempted. "Dad kept all this?" Sterling whispered, face pale. "Your father was meticulous," Patricia said. "He knew exactly who you all were. Now, about the estate distribution." "Wait," I interrupted, finding one last envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. "My dearest Layla," I read aloud, my voice shaking. "If they're watching, let them hear this. You never asked for my money. You asked for my love, my trust, my partnership in making the world better. That's why I'm leaving you not just the house, but control of all my charitable foundations. You'll continue the work we started together." Riker's lawyer was frantically flipping through papers. "This can't be binding." "Oh, but it is," Patricia smiled. "As for you boys, your father left you each exactly $1, plus those loan repayment schedules, of course." $1? Harvey's legs gave out, and he sank into a chair. "That's impossible. The rest," I continued reading, "will fund the foundations we built together. And one new project, a support system for women falsely labeled as gold diggers, who genuinely love partners despite age differences. Because love, real love, isn't about money. It's about making the world better together. Sterling stormed out. Riker followed, dragging his useless lawyer along. Harvey just sat there, staring at nothing. Charles recorded everything, Patricia explained softly. Every cruel comment, every scheme they planned. He knew they'd try to paint you as a gold digger, so he spent the last year building an airtight case proving otherwise. I touched the screen where Charles's face was frozen, smiling at me. He knew them better than they knew themselves. The foundations are yours now, Patricia said. All of them. You're in charge of his entire charitable legacy. Harvey finally stood. This isn't over, he threatened weakly, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, I picked up the portfolio, it is. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. These foundations won't run themselves. As they left, I sat in Charles's chair, surrounded by evidence of our shared vision. He hadn't just protected me, he'd empowered me to continue our mission. And somehow, that felt like the greatest inheritance of all. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Riker's name flashed on the screen for the 20th time. You should answer it, Yvonne said, helping me sort through foundation documents. Get it over with. I picked up on the 21st ring. What? We need to talk. Riker's voice was strained. Face to face, all of us. There's nothing to discuss. 1 million each, he said quickly. That's our offer. We'll drop any legal challenges if you give us 1 million each from the foundation funds. I laughed. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. 2 million then. Come on, Layla, be reasonable. Meeting's in an hour, I said. Patricia's office. Bring your brothers. Patricia had coffee waiting when we arrived. The brothers looked terrible. Sterling's designer suit was wrinkled, Harvey's eyes were bloodshot, and Riker's usual arrogance had deflated into desperation. Before you start, I held up my hand. There's one last video you need to see. God, not another one, Sterling groaned. Patricia pressed play. Charles appeared on screen, looking directly into the camera. Boys, if you're watching this, you've already tried to negotiate with Layla. Let me be clear. Every foundation dollar is legally protected. Every attempt to contest will only drain your own resources. Harvey slumped in his chair. But here's what you don't know, Charles continued. Those loan repayment schedules? They're due in full by the end of this month. If you fail to pay, everything you own becomes collateral. Your homes, cars, investments. Everything. He can't do that, Riker whispered. We never signed. Actually, Patricia pulled out 3 documents. You did. Remember those investment contracts you signed last year? Read the fine print. Sterling grabbed the papers, face growing pale. This is insane! We'll be ruined! Unless, Charles said on screen, you agree to Layla's terms. I sat forward. Here's the deal. You publicly apologize for your treatment of me. Admit your assumptions were wrong. Then, you'll each work for one of the foundations, unpaid, for 1 year. After that, your debts will be forgiven. Work? For free? Harvey looked horrified. At a charity? Manual labor, I specified. Building houses, serving at shelters, actually helping people for once in your lives. And if we refuse? Riker challenged. Then I call in the loans tomorrow, I shrugged. Your choice. The brothers huddled in the corner, whispered arguments growing heated. Finally, Riker turned back. We need time to think. You have 1 hour, Patricia said. After that, I start the paperwork to seize your assets. They fled the office, leaving their coffee untouched. Think they'll do it? Yvonne asked after they left. They have no choice, Patricia smiled. Charles made sure of that. He knew money was the only language they understood. My phone buzzed. A text from Sterling. This is cruel. I replied. Crueler than calling me a gold digger at my husband's funeral? 58 minutes later, they returned. Riker looked like he'd aged 10 years. Fine, he spat. We'll do it. But we want something in writing saying our debts will be cleared after the year. Already prepared, Patricia handed them contracts. Sign here. As they signed, I pulled out my phone. One more thing. The public apology? You're doing it now. Live on my Instagram. You're enjoying this, Harvey accused. Actually, I'm not, I said quietly. I wish you'd seen me as family, seen how much I loved your father. Maybe then things would be different. Sterling looked away, something like shame crossing his face. One by one, they recorded their apologies. Riker went first, stiff but sincere enough. Harvey mumbled through his. But Sterling surprised me. I was wrong, he said, looking directly at the camera. Layla loved our father in a way we never did. Selflessly, completely. We were the ones who saw him as a bank account. I'm sorry. After they left, Patricia squeezed my shoulder. Charles would be proud. Tomorrow, I said, checking my calendar. Riker starts work at the women's shelter. Harvey gets the homeless outreach program, and Sterling, I smiled, he'll be building houses in the summer heat. Karma's a beautiful thing, Yvonne grinned. My phone buzzed with messages from their wives, their friends, their business associates, all reacting to the apology videos. The truth was finally out. That night, I sat in Charles's study, touching the frame of our wedding photo. I did it, I whispered. I made them see the truth. Not just about me, but about themselves. The foundations would continue. Lives would be changed. And 3 privileged men would learn the value of honest work and genuine service. It wasn't revenge. It was redemption. Just as Charles had planned all along. You missed a spot, I said, watching Riker scrub the shelter's kitchen floor. His once manicured hands were red and raw from cleaning products. This is humiliating, he muttered, dunking the brush back into the bucket. More humiliating than trying to steal from charity? Maria, the shelter's director, walked in with more cleaning supplies. The bathroom needs attention next. It had been 2 weeks since the brothers started their mandatory community service. The transformation was slow but noticeable. My phone buzzed. A text from Harvey's supervisor at the homeless outreach program. He actually showed up early today, still complaining, but he's learning. Layla! Sterling's voice called from outside. I walked out to find him shirtless, sweating under the summer sun, helping frame a new house. Can we talk? Need a break already? No. He wiped his forehead. I met someone. The woman whose house we're building. Single mom, 3 kids, escaped an abusive marriage. She told me her story. I waited. Dad would have helped her, wouldn't he? Even before he met you? Yes, I said softly. He would have. I never knew what these foundations actually did, Sterling admitted. The real impact they have. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Patricia's number. Turn on the news, she said without greeting. Now. Inside the shelter's office, I flipped on the TV. A reporter stood outside our main foundation building. Sources claim the Wright brothers are contesting their father's will again, this time alleging video tampering and coercion. What? I spun to face Sterling. Are you serious? He looked genuinely shocked. I didn't know about this. Must be Riker. He was meeting with lawyers last night. I stormed into the kitchen. Riker was gone. He got a call and left 10 minutes ago, Maria reported. Said it was an emergency. My phone exploded with notifications. Social media was already buzzing with the news, undoing all the progress from their public apologies. Emergency foundation meeting, I texted Patricia. 1 hour. At the office, Harvey was waiting. I had nothing to do with this, he said immediately. The outreach program. It's changing how I see things. Save it, I snapped, just as Patricia arrived with a thick folder. Your brother, she said to Harvey, just made a huge mistake. Show them. She spread out documents across the conference table. Charles anticipated this. There's a clause in their contracts. Any legal challenge during their service year triggers immediate asset seizure. No warnings, no negotiations. Riker's going to lose everything, Harvey whispered. Unless you stop him, I said. Right now. Sterling burst in, still in his work clothes. I called his wife. She said he's meeting the lawyers at the courthouse in 20 minutes. Then what are we waiting for? Harvey grabbed his keys. We found Riker on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters. His lawyer was mid-speech about video manipulation and undue influence. Stop! Harvey's voice boomed across the plaza. Brother, you need to stop. Stay out of this, Riker hissed. Show him, I told Patricia. She handed Riker the clause documents. His face went from confident to terrified in seconds. It's not just you, Sterling said quietly. Think about Sarah, the kids. You'll lose everything. The foundations, Harvey added. They're actually helping people, Riker. Real people. Come back to the shelter. See for yourself. Reporters pressed closer, cameras rolling. Riker looked at his lawyer, then at me. If I drop this, you keep your assets, Patricia confirmed, but you finish your year of service. All of it. He closed his eyes, handed the papers back to his lawyer. Press conference canceled. No comment. The reporters groaned, but kept filming as Riker turned to me. I'm sorry, he said, loud enough for the cameras to catch. Again, for everything. Back at the shelter, Maria had him clean the bathrooms twice for disappearing. I watched him work, remembering Charles's words about redemption. Your father planned for everything, Patricia said, reviewing the contract clause. He knew Riker would try something like this. He knew his sons, I agreed, and he knew they needed this wake-up call. My phone buzzed. A message from the woman whose house Sterling was helping build. Your brother-in-law spent his lunch break playing catch with my kids. Whatever you're doing, it's working. That evening, I found Harvey sorting donations at the outreach center, long after his required hours. Why are you still here? I asked. He paused, holding a child's coat. Dad used to say money wasn't real wealth. I never understood that until now. I left him there, drove home to Charles, our house. In the study, I touched the photo of us on our wedding day. You were right, I whispered. Sometimes people need to lose everything to find what matters. The foundations would continue. And maybe, just maybe, 3 brothers would find their redemption in the process. 6 months into their service, the annual foundation gala arrived. I stood at the podium, surveying the crowd of donors and beneficiaries. Where's Riker? I whispered to Patricia. He was supposed to speak about his experience at the women's shelter. Running late, she checked her phone. Traffic. The doors burst open. Riker rushed in, but he wasn't alone. Sarah, one of the shelter residents he'd been working with, followed with her 2 small children. Sorry, he panted, reaching the stage. Sarah's babysitter canceled. I couldn't let her miss this. I blinked in surprise. The Riker I'd known 6 months ago wouldn't have cared. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the crowd, tonight we celebrate not just our foundation's achievements, but the power of transformation. I'd like to introduce Riker, who has a story to share. He approached the microphone, straightening his tie. 6 months ago, I thought I knew everything about wealth. I was wrong. His voice cracked. True wealth isn't in bank accounts. It's in the smile of a domestic violence survivor when she gets her first apartment. It's in her children feeling safe for the first time in years. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes, hugging her kids closer. My father knew this, Riker continued. He tried to teach us, but we were too blind to see, until now. Harvey stood up from his table. May I? He gestured to the microphone. Last week, Harvey said, taking the stage, a homeless veteran I've been working with got a job. When he told me, he hugged me and cried. Me, the guy who used to spend his father's money at casinos. That hug was worth more than any jackpot. Sterling joined them, still wearing his construction site boots. The house we finished today, it's for a family of 5 who've been living in their car. The youngest daughter asked if she could paint her room purple. He smiled. So I stayed late to help her do it. The crowd was silent, captivated. Our father, Riker's voice strengthened, married a woman who understood what he'd known all along, that true legacy isn't measured in dollars. Layla, He turned to me. "We were wrong about you. Completely wrong." Suddenly, Patricia rushed to the stage, whispering urgently in my ear. "The lawyers found something in Charles' private vault. You need to see this now." In a back room, she played a video on her tablet. Charles appeared, looking frail but determined. "If you're watching this," he said, "my sons have completed at least 6 months of service. Patricia, show them the final document." She pulled out an envelope. Inside was a new will addendum. "If they prove genuine change," Charles continued, "if they demonstrate true understanding of our mission, they each receive a trust, not for themselves, but to establish their own charitable foundations." The brothers stared at the document in shock. "Dad set this up?" Sterling whispered. "He never gave up on you," I said. "He believed you could change." "There's more." Patricia pointed to the screen. "Layla," Charles smiled warmly, "you'll oversee these trusts. Guide them. You've always understood what matters most. Help my sons understand, too." Riker grabbed my arm. "Sarah's housing application. Could my foundation—" "The Veteran Employment Program," Harvey interrupted. "I have ideas." "Wait!" I held up my hands. "You have to complete the full year first. Prove this change is real." "It is real," Sterling said quietly. "That little girl's purple room? I'm going back tomorrow to help her decorate." Back in the gala, Sarah took the microphone. "6 months ago, I was terrified of men in suits. Then I met Riker, scrubbing toilets at the shelter." The crowd chuckled. "He taught my son to tie his shoes, helped my daughter with homework. Small things that meant everything." Other beneficiaries stood up, sharing stories. The homeless veteran Harvey helped. The family moving into Sterling's latest house project. "Charles Wright's legacy," Patricia addressed the crowd, "isn't just in buildings or programs. It's in the transformation of his own family." Later that night, I found Riker in the shelter's playroom, reading a story to Sarah's kids. Harvey was planning a job fair with his veteran friends. Sterling had blueprints spread out, designing a playground for his next housing project. My phone buzzed, a message from Yvonne. Charles would be so proud right now. I watched the brothers, remembering Charles's words about karma and consequences. But this wasn't the karma of punishment. It was the karma of transformation. "Dad knew exactly what he was doing," Sterling said, joining me. "The money was never the real inheritance." "No," I agreed. "The real inheritance was this, the chance to become who you were meant to be." Outside, the city lights twinkled. Somewhere out there, more lives waited to be changed. And now, instead of 3 enemies, I had 3 partners in continuing Charles's true legacy. The final day of their mandatory service arrived with little fanfare. I found the brothers already at work. Riker organizing a job fair at the shelter, Harvey coordinating veteran housing placements, and Sterling supervising the completion of his 10th house. "Ready for the final foundation meeting?" Patricia asked, carrying a stack of folders into Charles's study. "Almost." I touched the wedding photo on the desk. "Just need to get something first." In the vault, behind Charles's old files, sat a small wooden box I'd never opened. Inside was a letter dated for this exact day, along with 3 identical envelopes. The brothers arrived looking different than they had a year ago. Gone were the designer suits and arrogant sneers. Riker's hands were calloused from honest work. Harvey's eyes held genuine compassion, and Sterling carried paint swatches for his next project. "Before we discuss your trusts," I placed the envelopes before them. "Your father left these for today." They opened them simultaneously. Inside each was a photo, Charles holding them as babies, along with handwritten notes. "My son," Riker read aloud, voice catching. "Today you understand what I've always known. True wealth lies in what you give, not what you take." Harvey wiped his eyes. "I never stopped believing in you, even when you lost your way. Your mother would be proud of the man you've become," Sterling finished, hands shaking. "Now," Patricia spread out the trust documents, "let's talk about your foundations." "Actually," Riker interrupted, "we have something to say first." He nodded to his brothers. Sarah's starting a counseling program for abuse survivors. I want my foundation to fund scholarships for women rebuilding their lives. Harvey leaned forward. The veterans taught me about brotherhood, loyalty. My foundation will focus on military families, helping them transition to civilian life. And mine, Sterling added, will partner with local schools. Kids need safe spaces to play, to learn, to grow. We're starting with that purple playground, but thinking bigger. I studied their faces, seeing Charles in each of them. You've really changed, because you showed us how, Riker said, by choosing love over vengeance when you had every right to destroy us. The foundations are just the beginning, Harvey added. We're selling our luxury cars, downsizing our homes. The money will do more good in the community. Sterling pulled out his phone. Remember that viral video of us apologizing? It hit 1 million views today. But look at the comments. I scrolled through. Inspired me to volunteer. Started helping at my local shelter. Changed how I judge people. Your story reached people, Patricia smiled. Changed perspectives about age gap relationships, about redemption, about what really matters. Charles knew, I said softly. He knew this would happen. Not exactly, a familiar voice called from the doorway. Maria from the shelter entered, followed by Sarah, the veteran Harvey helped, and the family moving into Sterling's latest house. We all had a hand in this transformation. The real inheritance, Riker stood, hugging Sarah, was the chance to become better people. To understand what Dad and Layla had, Harvey added, shaking his veteran friend's hand. To build something meaningful. Sterling lifted the little girl who'd wanted the purple room. Patricia handed me one final document, the official transfer of trust powers. But instead of signing immediately, I looked at the brothers. Charles believed in second chances, I said. Prove him right. We will, they answered in unison. As everyone filed out, I stayed behind in the study. The wedding photo caught the late afternoon light, and for a moment, I swore Charles was smiling differently. You planned it all, I whispered. The video evidence, the service requirement, the delayed trusts. You knew revenge wouldn't heal them. Only love could do that. My phone buzzed. A group text from the brothers. Meeting tomorrow to plan the joint foundation event? Sarah's bringing coffee, veterans are handling logistics, and the kids want to design posters. I smiled, remembering Charles's words about karma and consequences. He'd been right. The greatest consequence wasn't punishment, but transformation. His sons had lost their inheritance only to gain something far more valuable: purpose, compassion, and a chance to continue their father's true legacy. We did it, my love. I touched his photo one last time. We really did it. Outside, I could hear Riker laughing with Sarah's kids, Harvey discussing veteran outreach plans, and Sterling explaining playground safety features to excited parents. The whispers that had once haunted my wedding day had transformed into something beautiful. The sound of lives being changed, one act of kindness at a time. And that, I realized, was the greatest love story of all.
The moment my mother's number flashed across my phone screen, I knew my carefully constructed world was about to crack. 20 years of silence, and she chooses to call on the day of the Industry Excellence Awards. Perfect timing, as always. I'm Sylvia, and I've spent the last 2 decades building something from nothing. My office, perched on the 32nd floor of downtown Manhattan, is a daily reminder of how far I've come from that terrified 18-year-old girl, pregnant with twins and abandoned by the one person who should have stood by her side. Ms. Lawson, your speech is ready for review, Claire said, poking her head through my office door. Her usual cheerful expression faltered when she saw my face. Everything okay? I declined the call and placed my phone face down. Just ghosts, Claire. Nothing I can't handle. The event starts in 3 hours. Jonathan's already there, supervising the setup. Claire hesitated. And your twins called. They're surprising you by coming to the ceremony. A smile broke through my tension. Ethan and Cora, my unexpected blessings, now freshmen in college. They weren't supposed to make it tonight. Some excuse about midterms. Those sneaky little... My phone buzzed again. Same number. Take it, Claire urged. I'll hold your calls for the next 15 minutes. After she left, I stared at the phone until it stopped buzzing. 3 missed calls. Then a text. We need to talk. I'm in the lobby. My hand started shaking. The lobby. She was here. I grabbed my blazer and headed for the elevator, my heels clicking against the marble floors with military precision. The security guard nodded as I passed, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing through the possibilities. Why now? What could she possibly want? The lobby was crowded with the usual afternoon rush, but I spotted her immediately. Roslyn, I refused to call her mom, looked exactly like I remembered, just with more expensive clothes and grayer hair. She was studying the building directory with that familiar, entitled expression. What are you doing here? My voice came out steadier than I felt. She turned, a practiced smile spreading across her face. Sylvia, darling, look at you. So successful. She moved to embrace me, but I stepped back. 20 years, Roslyn. 20 years of nothing, and now you show up unannounced. Can't a mother be proud of her daughter? She glanced around the lobby. Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private. Your office, maybe. There's nothing to discuss. I have an important event tonight. Yes, the Industry Excellence Awards. I read about it. Her smile turned calculating. That's quite an achievement. Your company's grown impressively. A chill ran down my spine. She'd been keeping tabs on me. What do you want? Can't this wait until we're somewhere private? No. Say what you came to say. She sighed dramatically. Fine. I've had some financial setbacks recently, and I thought, given your success, you might want to help family. I actually laughed. Family? You lost the right to call yourself that when you walked out on your pregnant teenage daughter. I raised you for 18 years, she countered, her voice hardening. I think that earns me some consideration. Besides, I have documentation of my investments in your early years. It would be a shame if questions arose about the origins of your startup capital. My blood ran cold. She was threatening me. Today of all days. Security, I called out, maintaining eye contact with her. Please escort this woman out. You can't avoid this conversation forever, Sylvia, she said as 2 guards approached. I'm staying at the Marriott. You have until tomorrow to reconsider. I watched them lead her away. My perfectly planned day now in shambles. My phone buzzed, a text from Cora. Just landed, can't wait to surprise you tonight. The irony wasn't lost on me. One daughter eager to celebrate my success, while my own mother arrived to extort me for it. Back in my office, Claire was waiting with concern etched on her face. That bad? Worse, I replied, sinking into my chair. She wants money, and she's not above blackmail to get it. Should we call Jonathan? Postpone the ceremony? I thought about my twins, flying in to surprise me. About the years I'd spent building this company, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices. About the little girl who once desperately wanted her mother's approval. No, I said, straightening my spine. She doesn't get to ruin this too. But Claire, first thing tomorrow, call our lawyers. If Roslyn wants a fight, she's going to learn exactly how strong her daughter has become. The Industry Excellence Award ceremony should have been my moment of triumph. Instead, I kept scanning the crowd, half expecting Roslyn to materialize and create a scene. The twins noticed my distraction immediately. Mom, you're doing that thing with your necklace again, Cora whispered, reaching over to still my fidgeting hands. We were seated at the main table, waiting for the keynote speaker to finish. Sorry, sweetie, just nervous about the speech. The lie felt bitter on my tongue. I'd promised myself never to lie to my children. Ethan leaned in from my other side. Bull, something's wrong. You've given dozens of speeches. His dark eyes, so like mine, narrowed. What aren't you telling us? Before I could respond, Jonathan appeared behind us. Sylvia, we need to deal with the situation in the lobby. My stomach dropped. She's here, isn't she? Who's here? Ethan demanded. Your grandmother, Jonathan replied, his usual diplomatic tone hardening. And she's making quite a scene. Cora grabbed my arm. Grandmother, as in... Stay here, I ordered, standing up. Both of you. Of course, they didn't listen. They never did when it really mattered. They followed me and Jonathan to the hotel lobby, where Roslyn was arguing with the event security. I have every right to see my daughter receive her award, she was saying, voice pitched to Carrie. Several guests were already watching the drama unfold. Mum, let us handle this, Cora whispered, but I shook my head. Roslyn, I called out, keeping my voice steady. This is inappropriate. She turned, that familiar manipulative smile spreading across her face. Darling, I couldn't miss your big night. Her eyes landed on the twins. And these must be my grandchildren. How grown up you both look. Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of me. We're not your anything. You lost that right 20 years ago. Such hostility. Roslyn pressed a hand to her chest, playing to her growing audience. I've made mistakes, yes, but I'm here to make amends, to be part of this family again. Family? Cora's laugh was cold. You abandoned our mother when she was pregnant, with twins, at 18. There were circumstances you don't understand. Oh, we understand perfectly, Ethan cut in. Mum told us everything. How you kicked her out because her pregnancy would embarrass you in front of your new husband's fancy friends. How you changed your number, moved away, pretended she didn't exist. Roslyn's facade cracked slightly. That's not entirely. And now, Cora continued, now that she's successful, you show up wanting what? Money, recognition, a relationship. I raised her. No, I interrupted, finding my voice. You didn't raise me. You controlled me, manipulated me, and when I needed you most, you abandoned me. The only thing you taught me was how not to be a mother. The lobby had gone silent. Roslyn glanced around, realizing her audience wasn't sympathetic. I have rights, she hissed, dropping the act. I invested in your future, paid for your education, until I got pregnant, I reminded her. Then you wrote me off as a lost cause. Everything I've achieved, I did despite you, not because of you. We'll see about that. She reached into her purse, pulling out an envelope. I have proof of my financial contributions. Perhaps your investors would be interested. Ethan snatched the envelope from her hands. You mean these? He started tearing it into pieces. Guess you'll need better leverage. Security, Jonathan called out. Please remove this woman. And this time, ensure she doesn't return. As the guards approached, Roslyn's mask completely slipped. You ungrateful little bitch. You think you're better than me. I made you who you are. No, Cora said firmly, taking my hand. She made herself who she is. And she made us who we are. You're nothing to us. I watched as they escorted Roslyn out, her threats echoing through the lobby. The twins stayed close, their presence anchoring me. Well, Jonathan said, breaking the tension, I believe they're about to announce the Industry Excellence Award for Innovation in Technology. Shall we? I looked at my children, my real family, and felt a surge of pride. Actually, I need to rewrite my acceptance speech. I think I finally know exactly what I want to say. About time, Ethan grinned, draping an arm over my shoulders. Just please don't make us cry in public. No promises, I replied, heading back to the ceremony with my head held high. Roslyn might have returned to haunt me, but she just reminded me of exactly how far I'd come and who had really been by my side along the way. The morning after the award ceremony, I found myself sorting through an old storage box I hadn't opened in years. The twins sat cross-legged on my office floor, examining faded photographs and documents. Mum, is this you? Cora held up a creased Polaroid of a teenage girl in an oversized sweater, trying to hide a small baby bump. 18 and terrified, I confirmed, taking the photo. That was taken the day before she kicked me out. Ethan picked up a wrinkled envelope. What's this? Don't... I started, but he'd already pulled out the contents. A handful of bounced checks and a handwritten note. "Don't contact me again. You made your choice." Ethan's voice shook with anger. "She wrote this to you when you were pregnant with us." A knock at the door saved me from answering. Claire entered, looking apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt, but Roslyn is in the building again. She somehow got past security using a visitor pass from another company." "Of course she did," I muttered. "Where is she now?" "Conference room B. Jonathan's stalling her." I stood up, straightening my blazer. "Kids, stay here." "Not happening," they said in unison. The walk to the conference room felt like marching into battle. Through the glass walls, I could see Roslyn sitting there, examining her manicure while Jonathan kept a careful distance. "I'll handle this," I said, pushing open the door. Roslyn's eyes flickered to the twins. "Family meeting? How appropriate." "What do you want?" I remained standing, the twins flanking me. "To remind you of something you seem to have forgotten." She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table. "Remember this place?" The photo showed a small medical clinic. My heart stopped. "What about it?" My voice sounded distant. "That's where I took you for your first prenatal appointment. Where I paid the deposit for your medical care." Her smile turned predatory. "Before you decided to ruin everything by keeping them." "You wanted me to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I gave you options," Roslyn said. "Very expensive options. Options that would have preserved your future. Instead, you chose this." She gestured vaguely at the twins. Ethan stepped forward, but Cora grabbed his arm. "Let her finish digging her grave," she whispered. "I have receipts," Roslyn continued. "Proof of every penny I invested in you. By my calculations, with interest, you owe me close to $500,000. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. "That's what this is about. Money. It's about what's fair. I sacrificed everything for you." "No," I cut her off. "You sacrificed me for everything else. Your reputation, your new marriage, your social standing." I pulled out my phone, and while we're discussing receipts, I played the recording from last night's confrontation in the hotel lobby. Her threats, her admission of attempted blackmail. "Extortion is still illegal, last time I checked," Jonathan added mildly. Roslyn's face paled. "You recorded me." "I record all potential security threats to my company," I replied. "Standard procedure. You wouldn't dare use that against your own mother." "Watch me," I leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to stay gone. If you ever try to contact me or my children again, this recording goes to every media outlet in the city. You can't—" "I can. I will. And just so we're clear," I pulled out my checkbook, wrote quickly, and tossed it at her. "Here's $500,000. Consider every imagined debt paid. We're done." She stared at the check, then at me. "This doesn't change anything. I'm still your mother." "No," Cora said quietly. "You're just the woman who gave birth to her. There's a difference." "Security's waiting outside," Jonathan added, opening the door. Roslyn stood, clutching the check. "You'll regret this, Sylvia. The truth about your success, about where you really came from, is right here," I interrupted, putting my arms around my twins. "Everything I am, everything I've built, came from choosing them, from proving you wrong. So thank you, Roslyn. Thank you for showing me exactly the kind of mother I never wanted to be." After she was gone, Ethan turned to me. "Did you really just give her $500,000? I smiled. "Look at the check." Cora ran to the door and came back with the discarded check. She read it and burst out laughing. "What?" Ethan grabbed it. "Pay to the order of, your conscience, amount, 0 tour and euros." "Mom, you're savage." "I learned from the best," I said, hugging them both. "Now, who's hungry? I think we all deserve some comfort food after that performance." "Pizza?" they asked hopefully. "Pizza," I agreed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about money or power. Sometimes, it's simply about showing them exactly what they threw away. "We have a problem," Jonathan announced, bursting into my office 3 days later. He dropped a stack of papers on my desk. "Your mother's been busy." I flipped through the documents, my stomach tightening. "She's meeting with Marcus Reynolds, our biggest competitor." Not just meeting. Look at the last page. The final document showed a series of email exchanges. My hands started shaking as I read them. "She's claiming she provided the initial seed money for my company." I stood up so quickly my chair rolled into the wall. "That's impossible. I have every bank record, every transaction." "She's fabricated quite a convincing paper trail," Jonathan said grimly. "Reynolds is considering using this information for a hostile takeover attempt." Claire appeared in the doorway. "Sylvia, the twins are here, and you need to see this." Ethan and Cora rushed in, Ethan clutching his laptop. "Mum, she's gone public." He turned the screen toward me, showing a business news website. The headline made my blood boil. "Tech CEO's success story questions. Mother claims rights to company ownership." "That's not even the worst part," Cora added, scrolling down. "She's giving interviews about how she sacrificed everything to support your early career." "She's trying to force my hand," I said, pacing. "Make me pay her off to keep quiet." "Actually," came a familiar voice from the door, "I'm trying to take back what's mine." Rosalind stood there, looking perfectly polished in an expensive suit. Behind her, Marcus Reynolds smiled like a shark that had just spotted blood in the water. "This is private property," Jonathan stepped forward. "You're trespassing." "Not for long," Reynolds replied smoothly. "Once these ownership documents are verified." "They're forgeries," I snapped. "Are they?" Rosalind pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Remember this, darling. The college fund I set up for you. The one you emptied to start your precious company." My heart stopped. The college fund. The one thing I'd tried to forget. "That money was mine," I said carefully. "You signed it over to me on my 18th birthday." "Under duress," she countered, "when you threatened to expose certain family secrets to your stepfather." The twins looked at me questioningly. I'd never told them this part of the story. "You want to talk about secrets, Roslyn?" I moved closer. "Like why you really set up that fund, where that money really came from?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Mom?" Cora touched my arm. "What's going on?" "Your grandmother didn't set up that college fund out of maternal love," I said, never breaking eye contact with Roslyn. "She set it up to hide money from her first divorce, money she embezzled from her ex-husband's company." Reynolds' shark smile disappeared. "Is this true?" "Of course not," Roslyn laughed, but it sounded hollow. "She's desperate. I have proof," I cut in. "Every transaction, every transfer. I found the papers when I was cleaning out her house after she kicked me out. That's why she signed the money over to me so easily, because she knew I could prove where it came from." "You're bluffing," she whispered. I walked to my desk, pulled out a thick file from the bottom drawer. "I kept everything. Been waiting 20 years for you to try something like this." Reynolds backed away from Roslyn. "I think we're done here." "Marcus, wait." She reached for him, but he was already heading for the door. "You didn't think I'd be prepared?" I asked quietly. "You taught me well, remember? Always keep leverage, always have a backup plan." "This isn't over," she hissed. "Actually," Jonathan interjected, "it is. Our lawyers are filing a defamation suit as we speak. Those false claims you made to the press, they're going to cost you." "You can't prove they're false." "Yes, we can," Ethan spoke up. "We found your old accountant. He's very chatty these days, especially since his retirement." Rosalind's composed facade cracked completely. "You ungrateful little—" "Security's on their way up," Claire announced from the door. "Should I have them escort Mrs. Lawson out, or would she prefer to leave with her dignity intact?" For a moment, Rosalind just stood there, looking older and smaller than I'd ever seen her. Then she straightened her spine, adjusted her designer bag, and turned to leave. "You'll regret this," she said over her shoulder. "No," I replied. "I won't. But I think you might." After she left, the twins hugged me tight. "That was badass, Mom," Cora whispered. "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "But why didn't you use this leverage before?" I looked at the file in my hands. 20 years of insurance against this exact moment. Because sometimes the best revenge is waiting for your enemy to destroy themselves. Jonathan cleared his throat. Speaking of destruction, shall we discuss our counterattack? I smiled, feeling more energized than I had in days. Oh yes, let's show her exactly what happens when you try to take on this family. Got it! Cora burst into my home office, laptop in hand, Ethan right behind her. You won't believe what we found. I looked up from the legal documents I'd been reviewing. It was Saturday morning, but we'd all been working around the clock since Rosalind's latest attack. Remember how you said Rosalind remarried right after kicking you out? Ethan pulled up a chair. Well, we did some digging into her new family. And? I set aside the papers, intrigued by their excitement. She's done this before. Cora turned her laptop toward me. 3 times. The screen showed a series of news articles spanning the last 20 years. Each one featured Rosalind, under slightly different names, involved in various financial disputes. Look at the pattern, Ethan pointed. She marries wealthy men, usually with grown children. Then she somehow gains control of family assets, and suddenly there's a massive family fallout. Her current husband, Cora added, is Richard Sterling. My eyes widened. The real estate developer? The very one, Ethan grinned, and guess who's been quietly selling off his assets without his knowledge? A knock at the door interrupted us. Jonathan entered, looking unusually animated. You need to see this, he said, turning on the TV in my office. The news channel showed Richard Sterling himself, standing outside his office building, surrounded by reporters. Allegations of unauthorized property sales and misappropriated funds, he was saying. I filed for divorce and am cooperating fully with the investigation. Holy shit, I whispered. That's not all, Jonathan said. Richard's children reached out to our lawyers. They want to talk. Within hours, my living room had turned into an impromptu war room. Richard's 3 adult children sat across from us, sharing stories that felt eerily familiar. She isolated our father, Sarah the oldest explained, convinced him we were after his money. Sound familiar? Then she started managing his finances, Michael, the middle child, added. Said she was protecting the family legacy. But you caught her, I said. Thanks to you, Lisa, the youngest, smiled. When we saw the news about her claims against your company, we started investigating, found the pattern you exposed. We're building a class action lawsuit, Sarah said. Other families have come forward. Would you be willing to testify? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Rosalind. We need to talk. One last chance to make this right. She's desperate, Ethan observed, reading over my shoulder. Good, Cora said firmly. Let's finish this. I typed back, Marriott, 1 hour, come alone. The hotel lobby was quiet when I arrived. I'd insisted on going alone, though I knew Jonathan had people watching the building. Rosalind sat in a corner, looking less polished than usual. I assume you've seen the news, I said, sitting across from her. You turned Richard against me. Her voice was bitter. Ruined everything I built. Like you tried to ruin me. I leaned forward. I have to know, was any of it ever real? Did you ever actually care about anyone besides yourself? Of course I cared, she snapped. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing but lessons in manipulation, I cut her off. And now those lessons are coming back to haunt you. What do you want? She asked tiredly. I want you to disappear, sign a confession admitting your claims about my company were false, return everything you stole from Richard, and never contact me or my children again. Or what? I pulled out my phone, showed her the evidence we'd gathered. Or I make sure every law enforcement agency in the country knows about your pattern of fraud. Every news outlet gets your story. Every family you've destroyed gets their justice. She stared at the phone, then at me. You really hate me that much? That's the thing, Rosalind. I don't hate you at all. I pity you. You could have had a real family, real relationships. Instead, you chose schemes and manipulation. And now you're alone. I can change, she whispered. No, I stood up. You can't. But you can face the consequences of your choices. The papers will be delivered tomorrow. Sign them or face the consequences. As I walked away, she called out, I did love you, you know, in my way. I turned back one last time. Your way wasn't love, Roslyn. It was control. And now you've lost both. Outside, the twins were waiting in the car, despite my instructions to stay home. Well? They asked in unison. Now we wait, I said, sliding into the back seat. But something tells me she'll sign. And then, Cora asked, I looked at my children, my real family, and smiled. Then we go back to living our best lives, because that's the greatest revenge of all. She's not going to sign, Claire announced, bursting into the conference room where we were reviewing quarterly reports. And it's worse than we thought. Jonathan pulled up a news website on the projector. My stomach dropped as I read the headline. Tech CEO's dark past, mother reveals family secrets. She's gone nuclear, Ethan said, reading over my shoulder. Look at these allegations. The article detailed supposed evidence of tax fraud, claiming I'd used illegal means to start my company. Worse, it included personal attacks about my pregnancy, suggesting I'd manipulated and blackmailed my way through those early years. She's trying to destroy everything, I whispered. Mom? Cora touched my arm. There's something else you should see. She pulled up a social media post. Roslyn had shared old photos of me as a teenager, including some from when I was pregnant. The caption read, A Mother's Sacrifice, the truth about my daughter's rise to power. The comments were brutal. People were already calling for investigations into my company. Your stock is dropping, Jonathan said quietly. Investors are getting nervous. My phone rang. Richard Sterling's daughter, Sarah. I put it on speaker. Turn on Channel 7, she said without preamble. Now. Claire grabbed the remote. There was Roslyn, sitting in a studio, tears streaming down her face. As a mother, I only wanted to protect her, she was saying, but the things she did, the ways she manipulated people, I can't stay silent anymore. That manipulative Ethan started, but I held up my hand. Wait, look behind her. In the background of the shot, barely visible, was Marcus Reynolds. He was watching the interview with a satisfied smile. They're working together, Jonathan realized. Reynolds is backing her play. Of course, I said, everything clicking into place. He wants my company. She wants revenge. Perfect partnership. What do we do? Cora asked. I stood up, straightening my jacket. We fight back. Claire, call the station. Book me for tomorrow morning's show. Jonathan, get me everything you can on Reynolds' recent business dealings. Kids, I need you to... Already on it, Ethan interrupted, typing furiously on his laptop. Found something interesting about Reynolds' recent acquisitions. They all follow a pattern similar to Roslyn's schemes. And look at this, Cora added, pulling up another document. The timing of their meetings coincides with several suspicious property transfers. My phone buzzed again, a text from Roslyn. Ready to negotiate yet? Mom? Cora looked worried. What's our play here? I smiled, feeling strangely calm. We give them exactly what they want, a public showdown. The next morning, I walked into the same studio where Roslyn had given her tearful performance. She was already there, along with Reynolds, both looking smugly confident. Darling, Roslyn said sweetly as the makeup artist prepared us for air. Last chance to make this right. Funny, I replied. I was about to say the same thing. The red light came on. The host introduced us, recapping the controversy. Roslyn launched into her well-rehearsed story about my supposed misdeeds. And what do you say to these allegations? The host asked me. I pulled out my phone. I say, let's listen to something interesting. I played an audio recording. Reynolds' voice. Once we take her company, you'll get your cut. Just stick to the story. Roslyn. What about the illegal property transfers? If those come out... Reynolds. They won't. Trust me. This plan is foolproof. The studio went silent. Reynolds' face turned purple. Roslyn's makeup couldn't hide her sudden pallor. That recording, the host stammered, is that real? As real as the documentation I've just sent to the SEC about Mr. Reynolds' recent business practices, I said calmly. And as real as the evidence of my mother's involvement in multiple fraud schemes across 3 states. You recorded us, Reynolds sputtered. No, I smiled. You recorded yourselves. My tech company specializes in cybersecurity, remember? Your phones have been compromising your conversations for weeks. Rosalind stood up, shaking. You can't. Security is waiting outside, I cut her off. Along with some very interested FBI agents. Would you prefer to walk out, or should they come in? The host was frantically signaling to the producer, but I wasn't finished. Oh, and Mom, those photos you posted? Thank you. They showed everyone exactly what I overcame to build my success. Every comment attacking me just proved how strong I had to be. As security led them away, the host turned to me. Would you like to make a statement? I looked directly into the camera. Success isn't about who gives you opportunities. It's about what you do with the challenges life throws at you. And family, real family stands by you. They don't try to tear you down for profit. The red light went off. Claire rushed in with updates about the stock price already rebounding. But all I could think about were my twins, watching from home, seeing their mother finally close this chapter of her life. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when I arrived for the hearing. 3 weeks had passed since the TV studio showdown, and now it was time to face the music, all of us. Ms. Lawson, they called out. Any comment on your mother's plea deal? I kept walking, Jonathan and the twins flanking me. Inside, the courtroom was already packed. Richard Sterling and his children sat in the front row, nodding as we passed. Rosalind and Reynolds were already there, both looking considerably less polished in their prison jumpsuits. All rise, the bailiff called out. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. I listened as the prosecutor laid out the charges: fraud, extortion, conspiracy, securities violations. The evidence we'd gathered had opened a Pandora's box of crimes spanning decades. The defendants have agreed to plead guilty to all charges, the prosecutor announced, in exchange for their cooperation in ongoing investigations. Rosalind turned around, her eyes finding mine. For the first time, I saw something real in them: fear. Before I accept these pleas, the judge said, I understand the primary victim would like to make a statement. I stood, smoothing my skirt. Cora squeezed my hand as I walked to the podium. Your Honor, I began. 20 years ago, I was 18 and pregnant with twins when my mother threw me out. She told me I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything. Those words haunted me for years. Rosalind shifted uncomfortably in her seat. But today, I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about justice, not just for me, but for every family these defendants have torn apart with their schemes. I turned to face them directly. Mr. Reynolds, you thought you could use my mother's bitterness to steal my company. Instead, you exposed your own criminal enterprise. And Mom, Rosalind, you thought you could destroy what I built, but you forgot something important. And what's that? Rosalind asked, her voice barely audible. You taught me to keep receipts, I smiled. Every manipulation, every scheme, I learned from watching you. The difference is, I used those lessons to protect myself and others, not to destroy them. The judge leaned forward. What are you asking for in terms of sentencing? The maximum allowed, I said firmly. Not for revenge, but for protection. These defendants have shown they won't stop unless forced to. They've hurt too many families, destroyed too many lives. Reynolds' attorney jumped up. Your Honor, my client... Save it, the judge cut him off. I've reviewed the evidence. The plea deals stand, with maximum sentences. He turned to Rosalind and Reynolds. You'll both have plenty of time to reflect on your choices. As the bailiffs led them away, Rosalind called out, Sylvia, please. Goodbye, Mum, I said quietly. I hope you find peace. Outside, the reporters were waiting again. This time I stopped. Ms. Lawson, how do you feel about the sentencing? I felt Ethan and Cora step up beside me. Today isn't about feelings, I replied. It's about accountability, about showing that success built on destroying others will eventually crumble. And what about your mother? Will you ever forgive her? I paused, considering. Forgiveness isn't about excusing actions. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger. So yes, I forgive her. For my sake, not hers. Mum, Cora whispered, look. Richard Sterling and his children were approaching. Sarah stepped forward first. Thank you, she said simply, for helping us expose the truth. We should be thanking you, I replied. Your courage in coming forward made this possible. Richard cleared his throat. We're organizing a support group for families affected by similar situations. Would you consider speaking at our first meeting? I looked at my twins, saw them nodding encouragingly. I'd be honored. Later that evening, we sat in my living room, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and case files we no longer needed. So, Jonathan said, raising his glass, what's next for the unstoppable Lawson family? Sleep, Ethan groaned, making us laugh. Actually, I said, pulling out my laptop, I've been thinking. We've learned a lot about how vulnerable families can be to manipulation and fraud. Maybe it's time to use that knowledge. What do you mean? Cora asked. I'm thinking of starting a foundation, something to help protect families, provide resources, legal support, turn all this pain into something positive. The Phoenix Foundation, Cora suggested, because you rose from the ashes of what she did to you. We rose, I corrected, hugging them both, and we're going to help others rise too. As my family discussed plans for the foundation, I realized something profound. Rosalind had tried to write my story as a tragedy. Instead, she'd helped create a legacy of strength, resilience, and hope. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. The Phoenix Foundation's inaugural event filled the hotel ballroom with survivors and their families. As I watched Sarah Sterling wrap up her powerful speech about recovering from familial fraud, my phone buzzed with a familiar prison number. I declined the call, just as I had every week since the sentencing. Still calling? Cora asked, adjusting the foundation's banner behind the podium. Every Wednesday at 6, I replied, like clockwork. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan announced from the stage, please welcome our founder, Sylvia. The applause felt different this time, not the polite corporate acknowledgement I was used to, but something warmer, more personal. These people understood my journey because they'd lived their own versions of it. When my mother first reappeared in my life, I began, I thought she came to destroy everything I'd built. Instead, she showed me exactly what needed to be built next. The audience leaned forward, many nodding in recognition. We all have stories of betrayal, of family members who chose greed over love. But those stories don't define us. What defines us is what we choose to do with our pain. A movement at the back of the room caught my eye. Richard Sterling had arrived with his youngest daughter, Lisa. They were supporting an elderly woman I recognized from the case files, another of Reynolds's victims. The Phoenix Foundation isn't just about preventing fraud, I continued. It's about redefining family. Sometimes family is who we choose, who stands by us when biological bonds fail. Ethan appeared at the side of the stage, giving me a thumbs up. He'd just finished setting up our new online support network, connecting survivors across the country. Today we're announcing our legal defense fund. No one should face these battles alone. No one should have to choose between justice and bankruptcy. The doors opened again. Marcus Reynolds' ex-wife entered with their children, all of them wearing Phoenix Foundation supporter pins. But most importantly, I said, my voice growing stronger, we're here to remind everyone that your worth isn't determined by those who failed you. It's determined by how you rise, how you rebuild, and how you help others do the same. After the speech, during the reception, Claire rushed over with her tablet. You need to see this. It was a news article. Rosalind Lawson attempts prison program reform, cites personal transformation. She's teaching other inmates about recognizing manipulation patterns, Claire explained. The prison psychologist says she's making real progress. Good for her, I said, meaning it, but that chapter of my life is closed. Mom, Cora called out. The Sterling siblings want to discuss expanding the Foundation's reach. The next hour flew by in a whirlwind of conversations, plans, and connections. People shared their stories, their triumphs, their ongoing struggles. Each one reinforced why we'd created the Foundation. As the event wound down, Jonathan joined me at a quiet corner table. Quite a turnout, he said, sliding me a coffee. But you haven't checked your phone in hours. I pulled it out, 7 missed calls from the prison. She's persistent, he observed. She always was. I stared at the notification. Maybe that's what made her so dangerous. And now, I deleted the notifications. Now she's just someone who taught me what not to be. Mom? The twins approached, followed by a group of young adults, all children of fraud victims. We want to start a youth outreach program, help kids spot the warning signs early. Looking at them, my children, who'd grown into such compassionate, strong individuals, I felt a surge of pride. You know what the best revenge is? I asked Jonathan. He gestured at the room full of healing families, at my twins leading their peer support initiative, at the wall displaying our Foundation's mission statement, transform pain into power. I think you figured it out, he smiled. The last guests were leaving when Claire brought me one final message, a letter from the prison. Unlike the others, I opened this one. Sylvia, I watched your Foundation announcement on TV. For the first time, I saw you, really saw you. Not as an extension of my ambitions or a target for my resentment, but as the remarkable woman you've become despite me, not because of me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that you've succeeded in the one area I always failed. You've created something that helps people instead of hurting them. Don't respond. Don't visit. Just know that at least one good thing came from my failures. They helped you become everything I never could be. Ah. I folded the letter and slipped it into my purse. Then I joined my real family, my children, my friends, my Foundation members, as they planned the next chapter of our shared story. Not a story of revenge or resentment, but one of resurrection, of rising from the ashes stronger, wiser, and ready to light the way for others. That's the thing about phoenixes, they don't just rise, they soar. The cottage always smelled like cinnamon and pine needles, even in summer. Now, standing in its empty living room for what might be the last time, all I could smell was dust and betrayal. My name is Nancy, and until yesterday, I thought I knew what family meant. That was before my brother Mauricio showed up at my door at 3 a.m., drunk and crying, confessing that he'd gambled away our inheritance, our grandmother's beloved cottage that held 25 years of our childhood memories. Nancy, please, you have to help me, Mauricio pleaded, his hands trembling as he gripped my kitchen counter. I can fix this. I just need time. I poured him a glass of water, trying to steady my own shaking hands. How much do you owe? 250,000. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The number hit me like a physical blow. The cottage is worth twice that. How did you even... I used it as collateral. His voice cracked. I was sure I could win it back. The guy I owe, he's giving me 3 days to pay up, or he takes ownership. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Does Aunt Olivia know? He shook his head. You're the only one I've told. Please, Nancy, you're good with money. Maybe we could get a loan or... Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. That was last night. Now, walking through the cottage's rooms, I touched the walls where our height measurements were marked in pencil. The window seat, where I'd read countless books on rainy afternoons. The creaky third step that we'd always jumped over during hide and seek. My phone buzzed. A text from Connor. How are you holding up? At the cottage. Need to clear my head. I typed back. Want company? I hesitated, then replied. Yes. 20 minutes later, Connor's truck crunched up the gravel driveway. He found me sitting on the porch swing, the same one where Grandma used to tell us stories about her youth. "Brought coffee," he said, handing me a cup. "And donuts. Comfort food." "Thanks." I took a sip, letting the warmth spread through my chest. I can't believe he did this, Connor. The cottage was supposed to stay in the family. Grandma made us promise. Connor settled beside me on the swing. "What are you going to do? What can I do? I don't have that kind of money lying around." I watched a chickadee hop along the porch railing. You know what hurts the most? He didn't even ask before using it as collateral. The cottage belongs to both of us. "Have you checked the paperwork? Maybe there's something." My bitter laugh cut him off. Mauricio handled all the inheritance paperwork after Grandma died. Said he'd take care of everything, since I was dealing with my divorce at the time. I shook my head. Stupid, trusting him like that. "That's not stupid, Nancy. That's being family." "Yeah, well, look where family got me." My phone buzzed again. "Mauricio, meeting with the guy today. Please tell me you have good news." I turned off the phone. Connor watched me carefully. "You know, my offer still stands. I could loan you." "No." I stood up abruptly. "I'm not solving Mauricio's gambling problems with more money. That's not helping him." "Then what?" I walked to the porch railing, gripping the weathered wood. "I don't know, but I need to do something. This cottage, it's not just about the money. Every important moment of our lives happened here. First kisses, broken hearts, celebrating victories, mourning losses, Grandma's last Christmas." My voice broke and Connor was beside me in an instant, his hand steady on my shoulder. "Remember when Callie fell out of that oak tree?" I pointed to the massive tree in the front yard. "Mauricio caught her. He was always there, always protecting us. What happened to that brother?" "Addiction changes people, Nancy." "Yeah." I wiped my eyes. "Well, maybe it's time I stopped enabling him." My phone started ringing in my pocket, Aunt Olivia's ringtone. She probably knew something was wrong. She always did. But I couldn't talk to her yet, couldn't bear to tell her how badly her nephew had betrayed us. "I need to go through Grandma's things," I said suddenly. "There might be something. I don't know, but I need to try." Connor nodded. "Want help?" "No, this is something I need to do alone." I gave him a weak smile. "Thanks for the coffee. And for being here." After Connor left, I stood in the cottage's doorway, looking at the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. Somewhere in this house were answers. They had to be. Grandma was too smart, too careful, to leave everything to chance. I closed the door behind me and headed for the attic. If I was going to find anything, that's where it would be, and I had 3 days to find it. The attic stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed, each step releasing clouds of dust into the afternoon light. I'd always loved this space as a kid. It felt like a treasure trove of family history. Now it might hold the key to saving our legacy. "Where do I even start?" I muttered, scanning the jumble of boxes and trunks. My phone buzzed again. "Mauricio." I silenced it without looking at the message. In the far corner stood Grandma's old hope chest, its brass hardware dulled with age. I remembered her telling me once, "Everything that matters is in that chest." At the time, I thought she meant old photos and keepsakes. Now I wondered if there was more to it. The lid was heavy and the hinges protested as I lifted it. Inside, the familiar scent of cedar and mothballs brought tears to my eyes. Photo albums, quilts, letters, tied with faded ribbons, and underneath it all, a leather document case I'd never seen before. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first paper I pulled out made my heart stop. "Official deed," I read aloud, my voice echoing in the dusty space. "This property, hereby transferred solely to Nancy Whitney." The date on the document was 3 months before Grandma died. My name, not Mauricio's, was clearly listed as the sole inheritor of the cottage. "That's impossible," I whispered, but there it was, in black and white. Legal documents, properly notarized, leaving the cottage to me alone. Which meant... My phone rang, startling me so badly I dropped the papers. Aunt Olivia's name flashed on the screen. This time I answered. "Nancy, dear, what's going on? Mauricio's been calling me in a panic." I took a deep breath. "Aunt Olivia, did you know about Grandma's will? The real one?" A long pause. "So you found it. You knew." My voice cracked. "Your grandmother made me promise not to tell unless absolutely necessary. She knew Mauricio had problems. She wanted to protect the cottage." I sank down onto an old trunk, clutching the papers. "But after she died, Mauricio said we inherited it together. He handled all the paperwork. Because you let him," Olivia said gently. "Nancy, you've always tried to protect him, even from himself. Your grandmother saw that too. That's why she left the cottage to you alone." He forged the inheritance documents, I realized, anger building in my chest. He committed fraud. What's brought this all up now? Before I could answer, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Mauricio's voice called up, "Nancy, you up here?" "I have to go," I whispered into the phone. "I'll call you back." Mauricio's head appeared through the attic opening. He looked terrible, pale and sweaty with dark circles under his eyes. "Been looking everywhere for you," he said, climbing up. "Why aren't you answering your phone? I need to know if you've figured something out about the money." I stood slowly, the document still in my hand. "Oh, I figured something out all right." He saw what I was holding and froze. "Where did you get those?" "Grandma's chest." I held up the deed. "Want to explain why you forged inheritance papers when the cottage was legally left to me?" All the colour drained from his face. "Nancy, I can explain." "Explain what? How you committed fraud? Or how you gambled away property that wasn't even yours to begin with?" He took a step toward me. "You don't understand. I needed—" "Don't." I backed away. "Don't you dare try to justify this. What are you going to do?" His voice was small, scared. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. The boy who used to protect me, who caught Callie falling from a tree, who taught me to ride a bike. Now he stood before me, a stranger shaped by addiction and lies. "I'm going to call Zuriel," I said firmly. "He's still practicing law and he needs to see these documents." "Nancy, please. You have until tomorrow morning to tell the family what you did, all of it. If you don't, I will." I walked past him toward the stairs. "And Mauricio, don't try to stop me." "It'll destroy everything," he called after me. "The whole family will fall apart." I paused at the top of the stairs. "You already did that when you betrayed us." As I descended the attic stairs, my phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "Any luck?" I typed back, "Found something big. Meet me at the diner in 20. His response was immediate. "On my way." The documents felt heavy in my hands as I walked to my car. Heavy with truth, with power, with the weight of decisions to come. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than despair. I felt strong. The bell above Joe's diner chimed as I pushed through the door. Connor already had our usual booth, 2 steaming mugs of coffee waiting. I slid the documents across the table before even sitting down. "Read these," I said. His eyes widened as he scanned the papers. "Holy shit, Nancy." "Yeah." I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, trying to stop them from shaking. "There's more. I found letters in Grandma's chest. She knew about Mauricio's gambling long before any of us did." I pulled out a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The waitress approached, but Connor waved her away with a quick shake of his head. "This one's from 6 years ago," I said, unfolding a letter dated just before Grandma's diagnosis. "Listen to this. My dearest Nancy, I've watched you carry the weight of others' burdens for too long. The cottage must be protected, not just for you, but for the future. Mauricio will never understand why I made this choice, but you will." Connor leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "She was protecting you. She was protecting all of us." I took a shaky sip of coffee. "There's a letter here from Mauricio to her, begging for money. He was in debt even then." "What are you going to do?" Before I could answer, the diner's door chimed again. Callie walked in, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Nancy, I thought that was your car outside." She bounced over to our booth, then stopped short when she saw our serious expressions. "What's wrong?" "Sit down, Cal," I said softly. She slid in beside me, her usual energy dimming. "Is this about Mauricio? Aunt Olivia called me. She seemed worried." I spread the documents out on the table. "I need to tell you something, but you have to promise to let me finish before you react." As I explained everything, the real deed, Mauricio's fraud, the gambling debt, Callie's face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, hurt, and finally, determination. "That absolute jackass," she breathed. "No wonder Grandma didn't trust him with the cottage." My phone buzzed. A text from Mauricio. "Please don't do this. Give me time to fix it." I showed the message to Connor and Callie. "Fix it?" Callie scoffed. "He's had years to fix it. Decades, even." "The deadline's tomorrow," Connor reminded me. "What's your plan?" I straightened the papers, squaring their edges with precise movements. "First, I'm calling Zuriel. We need to know exactly where we stand legally. Then..." The diner's door chimed again. This time, Mauricio walked in. He looked even worse than he had in the attic, if that was possible. "Nancy," he called out, heading toward our booth. "We need to talk." Callie stood up, blocking his path. "Back off, Mauricio." "This is family business, Cal. Stay out of it." "I am family," she snapped. "The family you're destroying." Other diners were starting to stare. Connor stood up too, his presence solid and reassuring. "Maybe we should take this outside," he suggested quietly. We moved to the parking lot, where the summer evening was cooling into dusk. Mauricio paced in front of us like a caged animal. "The guy I owe," he said, "he's willing to make a deal. If I can get half the money by tomorrow..." "Stop." My voice was stronger than I expected. "Just stop, Mauricio. There is no deal. The cottage isn't yours to bargain with. It never was. You don't understand what these people are capable of." "And whose fault is that?" Callie demanded. I held up my hand, silencing them both. "I'm calling Zuriel tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the police to report the fraud. After that, I'm telling the whole family everything." Mauricio's face crumpled. "They'll never forgive me. Maybe that's what you need," I said softly. "Maybe hitting rock bottom is the only way you'll ever change." "Nancy, please." He reached for my arm, but Connor stepped between us. "I think you should leave," Connor said firmly. We watched Mauricio walk to his car, shoulders slumped in defeat. As he drove away, Callie turned to me. "What about the guy he owes money to?" "That's Mauricio's problem now," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "I'm done enabling him." My phone buzzed again, Zuriel responding to my earlier message. "Free to talk now, this sounds serious." "Go," Connor said. "We'll handle things here." Callie hugged me fiercely. "We're with you, Nancy, all the way." As I drove home to make the call that would change everything, I thought about Grandma's letters. She'd seen this coming years ago, had tried to protect us all in her own way. Now it was my turn to protect our family's legacy, even if it meant tearing down the walls of secrets we'd built around ourselves. Tomorrow would be hard. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing exactly what needed to be done. Zuriel's office smelled like leather and coffee, and the morning sun threw long shadows across his desk as he reviewed the documents. I'd known him since high school, but his professional demeanor still took some getting used to. "This is clear-cut fraud," he said, looking up from the papers. "The original deed is ironclad. Your grandmother's intentions were explicit." "What about the gambling debt? Any contracts Mauricio made using the cottage as collateral are void. He had no legal right to make those agreements." Zuriel leaned forward. "But Nancy, you need to know. These people he owes money to, they don't care about legal rights." My phone buzzed. "Aunt Olivia." "Family dinner tonight. No excuses, everyone needs to talk." "Perfect timing," I muttered, showing Zuriel the message. "Are you ready for this?" Before I could answer, his office door burst open. Mauricio stormed in, followed by his frantic secretary trying to stop him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mack," she stammered. "He just pushed past me." "It's okay, Sarah," Zuriel said calmly. "Please close the door." Mauricio looked wild, desperate. You can't do this, Nancy. These guys, they're coming to collect today. They don't care about legal documents. Lower your voice, Zuriel warned. Or what? Mauricio laughed bitterly. You'll call security. Go ahead. It won't stop what's coming. I stood up, facing my brother. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to protect you. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Neither do you, Zuriel interjected, holding up the documents. This is serious fraud, Mauricio. We're talking potential jail time. All the color drained from Mauricio's face. You wouldn't. Try me. I met his eyes steadily. Be at Aunt Olivia's tonight. You can tell everyone yourself, or I will. Nancy. Get out of my office, Zuriel said firmly, before I call the police. After Mauricio left, Zuriel turned to me. You need to be careful. People like this, they play dirty. I know. I gathered the documents. That's why I'm done playing nice. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparations. Connor helped me make copies of all the documents. Callie texted updates about who was coming to dinner. Even Aunt Olivia called to ask if I needed anything, though I could tell she was nervous about what was coming. At 6 o'clock, I pulled up to Aunt Olivia's house. Cars lined the street. Everyone had shown up. Through the front window, I could see people gathering in the living room. My hands shook as I grabbed my folder of documents from the passenger seat. Connor's truck pulled up behind me. Thought you might want backup. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did. He squeezed my shoulder. Ready? Inside, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mauricio sat alone in a corner, while other family members clustered in small groups, whispering. Aunt Olivia bustled around with drinks, trying to maintain normalcy. Nancy, Callie hurried over. Uncle Robert's here. Even Cousin Pete came. Good, I said. Everyone needs to hear this. Aunt Olivia clinked her glass with a spoon. Dinner's ready, everyone. Let's move to the dining room. As people settled around the massive table, I remained standing. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear over it. Before we eat, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, there's something you all need to know. I pulled out the documents, laying them on the table. 6 years ago, Grandma left the cottage to me. Only me. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Mauricio forged documents to make it appear we inherited it together, and now he's gambled it away to criminals. The silence that followed was deafening. That's a lie, Uncle Robert said finally. No, Mauricio spoke up, his voice hollow. It's true, all of it. Chaos erupted. Aunt Olivia started crying. Uncle Robert shouted about family loyalty. Cousin Pete swore loudly. Enough! Callie's voice cut through the noise. Let Nancy finish. I spread out the documents. It's all here. The original deed, Grandma's letters, the fraud, everything. How could you? Aunt Olivia asked Mauricio, tears streaming down her face. Your own grandmother. I needed the money, he whispered. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. And now, Uncle Robert demanded, what happens now? I straightened my shoulders. Now, I'm taking legal action to protect the cottage and to finally force Mauricio to face consequences. You'll destroy this family, Uncle Robert warned. No, Connor spoke up from behind me. Secrets and enablers destroy families. The truth might be the only thing that can save it. As arguments erupted around the table, I caught Mauricio's eye. For the first time since this began, I saw something there besides desperation. I saw fear. The next morning, I sat in the police station, watching Detective Torres review the documents. Each tick of the wall clock felt like a hammer blow. This is extensive fraud, she said finally. And you're sure you want to press charges? Yes. My voice didn't waver. It's time. She was about to respond when her phone buzzed. The conversation that followed made my blood run cold. There's been an incident at the cottage, she said, hanging up. We should go, now. The drive to the cottage was a blur. As we turned onto the gravel drive, my heart stopped. The front door was splintered, windows broken. Spray paint marred the white siding. Pay up or burn. 2 police cars were already there. Connor's truck pulled up behind us, and he rushed to my side. I came as soon as you texted, he said, then saw the damage. Jesus Christ. Detective Torres was already talking to the other officers. I walked up to the porch, glass crunching under my feet. The porch swing, Grandma's swing, lay broken on its side. Nancy! Callie's voice made me turn. She ran up the drive, Aunt Olivia right behind her. We saw your message. Are you okay? I'm fine, but... Where's Mauricio? Aunt Olivia demanded. As if summoned by his name, a car screeched into the driveway. Mauricio jumped out, followed by a man I'd never seen before. My brother's face was bloody. Nancy, he shouted, you have to leave, now. The stranger grabbed Mauricio's arm. This your sister? The one with the deed? Detective Torres and the other officers moved quickly, hands on their weapons. Sir, step away from him. This ain't your business, cops, the man sneered. This is family business. It became our business when you vandalized private property, Torres replied. Hands where we can see them. Everything happened fast after that. The man shoved Mauricio aside and ran. Officers tackled him before he reached his car. Mauricio collapsed on the gravel, blood dripping from his nose. They came for me first, he gasped as I knelt beside him. Said if I didn't bring them the deed, they'd burn everything down. Aunt Olivia rushed to get her first aid kit from her car. Callie helped Mauricio to the porch steps, while Connor and I followed Detective Torres inside to assess the damage. The interior was ransacked, furniture overturned, photos smashed. They'd even ripped up floorboards, probably looking for hidden valuables. This is what gambling debts look like, Torres said quietly. These people don't play by legal rules. What do? We've got enough to arrest his associates now, but Mauricio needs to cooperate. Tell us everything. Connor squeezed my shoulder. I'll get started boarding up the windows. Outside, I found Mauricio sitting on the steps, while Aunt Olivia cleaned his face. He looked broken, defeated. How many are there? I asked. How many people are you involved with? 3 main guys, he whispered. But their network, it's big. Detective Torres stepped forward. Mr. Whitney, we need your formal statement. The more you tell us, the more we can protect your family. He looked up at me, eyes red. Nancy, I'm so sorry. I never meant... Save it, I cut him off. Just tell them everything. For once in your life, do the right thing. As the police took Mauricio's statement, more family members arrived. Uncle Robert, Cousin Pete, even distant relatives who'd heard about the drama. They formed a work crew without being asked, boarding windows, sweeping glass, righting furniture. Callie found me in Grandma's old room, picking up scattered photos. Look what I found, she said, holding up an intact picture. It showed Grandma on the porch swing, young Mauricio and me on either side of her. We were all laughing at something long forgotten. She knew this would happen, I said softly. Maybe not exactly this, but something like it. That's why she left the cottage to me. What are you going to do with it now? Before I could answer, Connor called from downstairs. Nancy, Zuriel's here. The lawyer stood in the living room, briefcase in hand. I've filed emergency injunctions, he announced, and I've contacted a security company. They'll be here within the hour to install a system. Thank you, I said. What about Mauricio? He's looking at serious charges, but his cooperation might help. Zuriel paused. The gambling ring he was involved with, the police have been trying to crack it for months. His testimony could be valuable. I watched through the window as Detective Torres led Mauricio to her car. Our eyes met briefly before he ducked inside. He's going to need a good lawyer, I said. I know one, Zuriel replied. But first, let's focus on securing your property. Your grandmother protected this place for a reason. Now it's your turn. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. But looking around at my family working together to repair the damage, I knew I wasn't carrying it alone. 2 weeks after the break-in, I stood in the cottage's newly repaired living room, surrounded by paint swatches and renovation catalogues. The security system beeped softly as Callie let herself in through the front door. You won't believe what I just heard, she announced, dropping her bag on the counter. Mauricio's testimony led to 6 arrests yesterday, major players in the gambling ring. Good. I tacked another paint sample to the wall. Maybe some good will come from all this. Have you visited him yet? No. I stepped back to examine the colors. Have you? Yesterday. Callie picked up a catalogue. He's different, clearer. Being in custody probably saved his life. The security system chimed again. This time it was Aunt Olivia, carrying a box of old photographs. Found these in my attic, she said. Thought they might help with inspiration for the renovation. She paused, looking around. What exactly are you planning to do with the place? I picked up a business plan from the coffee table and handed it to her. I'm turning it into a women's retreat center, a place for healing, just like it was for us growing up. Olivia's eyes widened as she read. Professional counseling services, art therapy, meditation spaces. Nancy, this is incredible. That's not even the best part, Callie chimed in. Tell her about the scholarship program. We'll offer free stays for women leaving abusive situations or recovering from addiction, I explained. Grandma always said this place had healing energy. Time to put it to good use. The doorbell rang. Connor and Uncle Robert, carrying lumber for the new deck. Security company called, Connor said, setting down the wood. They're adding cameras to the back property line tomorrow. Uncle Robert cleared his throat awkwardly. Nancy, about what I said at the dinner, about destroying the family. It's okay. No, it's not. I was wrong. This, he gestured around the room, this is bringing us together in ways Mauricio's secrets never could. My phone buzzed, a text from Zuriel. Plea deal offered. Meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. Speaking of Mauricio, I said, showing them the message. Are you going? Callie asked. Yes. I set down the paint samples. He needs to see what his action set in motion, both the bad and the good. The next morning, I sat across from Mauricio in the jail's visiting room. He looked healthier than I'd seen him in years, clear-eyed, steady. They're offering 5 years, he said without preamble. Could be out in 3 with good behavior. Are you taking it? Yes. He folded his hands on the table. It's fair. More than fair, considering everything. I pulled out my tablet and showed him the renovation plans. This is what I'm doing with the cottage. He studied the images, tears forming in his eyes. Grandma would have loved this. I know. Nancy, He wiped his eyes. I keep thinking about what you said, about consequences. You were right. I needed this. Needed to hit bottom. Are you going to meetings? He nodded. Every day in here. Turns out there are a lot of us gambling addicts in prison. He attempted a weak smile. Who knew? Mauricio. I know. Bad joke. He looked down at his hands. The therapist here says I use gambling to feel powerful, to feel in control. Pretty ironic, huh? And now I'm learning what real control feels like, making amends, taking responsibility. He met my eyes. I'm sorry, Nancy, for everything. The guard called time. As I stood to leave, Mauricio spoke again. That program you're starting, the addiction recovery part. When I get out, maybe I could help, share my story. I paused at the door. We'll see. Prove you've changed first. Back at the cottage, I found Callie and Connor painting the living room in the sage green I'd finally chosen. Aunt Olivia sat at the new kitchen island, sorting through applications for the retreat program. You won't believe how many inquiries we've had already, she said, waving a stack of papers. Word's spreading fast. People need this, Callie called from her perch on the ladder. A safe place to heal. I picked up a brush and joined them, working in comfortable silence until Connor spoke up. How is Mauricio? Different, I said, carefully cutting in along the ceiling. Maybe even better. Think he'll stay that way? I don't know. I stepped back to admire our work. But that's not my responsibility anymore. This is. The setting sun streamed through the new windows, casting long shadows across the freshly painted walls. In 2 months, we'd welcome our first guests. Women seeking refuge, healing, hope, just like Grandma had offered to so many others during her lifetime. She'd be proud, Aunt Olivia said softly, reading my thoughts. Of all of this, of you. I smiled, dipping my brush back into the paint. I know. That's why I'm doing it. 6 months later, I stood in front of the cottage, now renamed Grace Haven, watching our first group of residents arrive. The transformation was complete. Fresh paint, new furniture, healing gardens, and most importantly, a sense of purpose. First day jitters? Connor asked, helping a woman with her bags. A little. I checked my clipboard. We're at full capacity. 12 women. The front door opened, and Callie bounded out. She'd quit her job to become our full-time activities coordinator, and her enthusiasm was contagious. Everyone's settling in, she reported, and wait until you see what Aunt Olivia's cooking for dinner. My phone buzzed, a text from Zuriel. Mauricio's parole hearing next month. He's asking if you'll speak. Before I could respond, one of our new residents approached. Sarah, mid-40s, hands shaking slightly as she spoke. I just wanted to say thank you, she said quietly. My counselor said it would take months to get a spot here. When you called about the opening, we prioritize emergency cases, I explained, remembering her intake form. Gambling addiction, like Mauricio. Lost everything, like Mauricio. But unlike my brother, she'd sought help before hitting rock bottom. The security system chimed as more women arrived. Each had their own story. Domestic violence, addiction, trauma. Each looked at the cottage the same way I used to, like it was a lighthouse in a storm. Nancy, Aunt Olivia called from the kitchen window. The reporter's here. I'd agreed to one interview about Grace Haven, hoping to reach more women who needed help. The reporter, Maria, met me on the front porch. This place has quite a story, she said, setting up her recorder. Family drama, betrayal, redemption. But what made you choose this particular mission? I watched a group of women touring the meditation garden with Callie. Sometimes the worst things in our lives lead us to our true purpose. My brother's addiction nearly destroyed this place. Now it helps others overcome their own battles. Speaking of your brother, sources say he's up for early parole. That's not part of this story, I said firmly. Today is about these women and their journeys. After the interview, I found Connor in the workshop we'd built behind the cottage. He was teaching a woodworking class, part of our therapy program. Look what Sarah made, he said, holding up a small jewelry box. First time she's ever used tools. It's beautiful, I told Sarah, who beamed with pride. The day flew by in a blur of activities. Art therapy in the sunroom, group counseling in the living room, cooking classes in the kitchen. By evening, the cottage hummed with a new kind of energy. Hope, possibility, strength. During dinner, my phone buzzed again. This time, a call from the prison. Nancy. Mauricio's voice was clear, steady. I saw the article about Grace Haven online. They published it already. How are you? Good. Really good. 9 months sober, leading GA meetings here twice a week. He paused. The parole hearing. I know. I'm not asking you to support my release. Just tell the truth, whatever you think they should know. After dinner, I found Aunt Olivia in Grandma's old garden, now transformed into a healing labyrinth. Mauricio called, I said, sitting beside her on the stone bench. And? He's different, calmer, more himself, like the brother I used to know. She patted my hand. People can change, dear, if they want to badly enough. But can they be trusted again? That's not for us to decide. We can only create space for possibility. She gestured at the cottage. Like you've done here. Later that night, after everyone had settled in, I sat on the new porch swing. The security lights cast a soft glow over the property, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Connor joined me, 2 cups of tea in hand. Penny for your thoughts. I'm going to speak at his hearing, I said, accepting the tea. Not to support or oppose, just to tell the truth. Which is? That addiction nearly destroyed our family, but it also led to this. I looked at the cottage, windows glowing warmly in the darkness. Maybe both things can be true. Maybe that's what healing really looks like. My phone lit up with a message from Sarah. Thank you for today. First time I felt hope in years. I showed Connor the message and he smiled. Grandma would say that's not a coincidence. No, I agreed, sipping my tea. She'd say it's grace. The owl called again, closer now. Inside, I could hear laughter from the community room, women finding connection, understanding, strength. The cottage had always been a sanctuary, but now it was something more. It was a beginning. The parole hearing room felt smaller than I expected. Mauricio sat at a table facing the board, his hand steady as he spoke about his recovery. I waited my turn, listening as he detailed his progress, his remorse, his plans for the future. Ms. Whitney? The board chairman nodded to me. You may speak now. I stood, smoothing my skirt. My brother betrayed our family's trust. He committed fraud, endangered our legacy, and caused harm that can't be undone. I paused, meeting Mauricio's eyes. But he also sparked a change that's helped dozens of women rebuild their lives. I told them about Grace Haven, about Sarah and the others who'd found healing there, about addiction's ripple effects, both destructive and transformative. I can't tell you if he's ready for release, I concluded, but I can tell you he's not the same person who went in. Outside the hearing room, Mauricio caught up to me. Nancy, wait. They'll notify you of their decision in a few days, I said. I know. That's not... He ran a hand through his hair. Remember when we were kids, and I caught Callie falling from that tree? Of course. You said that day that I was your hero. His voice cracked. I want to be that person again. Not for you, but for myself, for others who are struggling like I was. One day at a time, right? He nodded. One day at a time. Back at Grace Haven, I found Sarah teaching another resident how to use the lathe in the workshop. Her hands were steady now, her eyes clear and focused. Look what we made, she said proudly, holding up a set of wooden candlesticks. For the dining room, Callie burst in, waving her phone. Nancy, the grant came through. We can add the East Wing. The expansion would mean 8 more beds, more lives we could touch. As we celebrated, Connor arrived with lunch for everyone. How'd it go? He asked quietly. I told the truth, all of it. I watched Sarah showing off her woodwork. Whatever happens next is up to him. That evening, we held our weekly community dinner. Residents past and present filled the dining room, sharing stories and strength. Sarah's candlesticks graced the center of the table, flames dancing as Aunt Olivia served her famous lasagna. I have an announcement, Sarah stood, her voice strong. Today marks 6 months clean, and I got a job, a real one, at a furniture maker's shop. Applause erupted. She'd started in our workshop barely able to hold a hammer. Now she was building a future, piece by piece. My phone buzzed, the parole board's decision. I stepped onto the porch to read it. Parole granted with conditions, mandatory counseling, regular check-ins, supervised work program. Below that, a note. Candidate shows exceptional progress and genuine remorse. Family support system in place. Connor found me still staring at the message. You okay? I think so. I showed him the phone. They're releasing him next month. What are you thinking? Inside, laughter rang out as someone told a joke. Through the window, I could see Sarah showing Aunt Olivia her portfolio of woodwork designs. New residents sat with program graduates, soaking in proof that change was possible. I'm thinking about something Grandma used to say, I replied. Grace isn't about getting what you deserve. It's about growing into what you could be. Wise woman. She knew the cottage would become this. Maybe not exactly this, but something that mattered. I turned to face him. Mauricio asked if he could volunteer here once he's settled, leading GA meetings, sharing his story. What did you say? I said we'd start with him attending meetings first, as a participant, not a leader. Show up, do the work, prove he means it. And if he does? Sarah's voice carried through the open window as she described her new job. Another resident cheered as she shared news about finding an apartment. Inside that cottage, lives were being rebuilt, hope restored, grace given and received. Then he'll be welcome here, I said, just like everyone else who's ready to change. Connor squeezed my hand as we headed back inside. The dining room glowed with warmth and conversation, Sarah's candlesticks burning bright at the center of it all. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new residents, new stories of struggle and strength. But tonight, watching this unlikely family share a meal and their victories, I finally understood what Grandma meant about grace. It wasn't just about second chances or forgiveness. It was about creating space for possibility, for transformation, for becoming. The cottage had always been meant for this, not just surviving betrayal, but transforming it into something beautiful, something that mattered, something that healed.
I always thought sisters were supposed to have each other's backs. That's what Mom used to tell us before she passed. Anyway, but watching Angela charm her way through Grandma's funeral, I realized some backs are meant to be stabbed. My name is Kira, and this is the story of how my sister destroyed my life, and how I rebuilt it from the ashes she left behind. She would have wanted you to have this, Angela said, dangling Grandma's vintage pearl necklace in front of our relatives. The same necklace Grandma had promised me on my 16th birthday. Kira's always been more practical. She'd prefer the money, wouldn't you, little sister? I stood there, frozen, as she played her part perfectly. The caring older sister, so thoughtful, so considerate. I wanted to scream that she was lying, that Grandma had specifically promised me that necklace, but the words wouldn't come. That's so generous of you, Angela, our Aunt Carol cooed, while Dad nodded approvingly. They were all under her spell, just like always. The reading of the will a week later was when everything truly fell apart. Grandma had left her estate to be split equally between Angela and me, a substantial inheritance that would have set us both up for life, along with her collection of family heirlooms. I just don't think Kira's in the right headspace to handle this responsibility, Angela announced during the family meeting. She's been so unstable since Mom died. Remember that time she quit her job without notice? I had quit because Angela had sabotaged my relationship with my boss. But nobody knew that part. I started to protest. But Angela cut me off with a concerned look. See how defensive she gets? I'm worried about her. She turned to Dad, her eyes welling up with perfectly timed tears. Maybe I should manage both portions until she's more stable, for her own good? Dad squeezed her hand. That might be best, sweetheart. Kira, your sister only wants to help. I watched in horror as my family nodded in agreement. Even Turner, my boyfriend at the time, looked convinced. Angela's right, babe. You have been a bit emotional lately. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and legal documents I was pressured to sign. Angela insisted it was all temporary, just until I got back on my feet. I signed them because fighting meant losing my family entirely. I signed them because I still wanted to believe my sister loved me. Then came the Instagram post that changed everything. Starting my new life in Paris. Sometimes you have to chase your dreams. Titi, blessed say your new beginnings. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking. There she was, champagne glass in hand, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. She'd emptied the accounts, taken everything. The money, the heirlooms, even Grandma's pearls, all gone. When I called Dad in a panic, his response cut deeper than Angela's theft. She says you agreed to this, Kira, that you wanted her to invest the money for both of you. She's always been better with finances. Dad, she's stolen everything. How can you not see what she's doing? His sigh was heavy with disappointment. I think you need help, sweetheart. This paranoia isn't healthy. I hung up and collapsed onto my kitchen floor, the cold tiles pressing against my forehead as I tried to breathe. My phone buzzed with a text from Turner. I think we need a break. Your family drama is too much right now. Later that night, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by unpaid bills I could have easily handled with my inheritance, My phone lit up with another Instagram notification. Angela, dining at some fancy restaurant, wearing grandma's pearls. The caption read, "Family is everything, missing my baby sister. Saksh, blessed Fafrash, family first." I threw my phone across the room, watching it shatter against the wall. In that moment, something inside me shattered too. My naivety, maybe, or the last traces of the little sister who used to worship her big sister Angela. As I swept up the broken pieces of my phone, I made a promise to myself. This wouldn't break me. Angela had taken everything else, but she couldn't take my determination to survive, to thrive. I just didn't know then how sweet that survival would taste when karma finally came knocking on my door, wearing designer heels and carrying a Louis Vuitton suitcase full of desperation. But we'll get to that part later. First, I had to learn how to stand on my own 2 feet in a world where the person who was supposed to lift me up had instead chosen to bury me alive. "You're seriously living off ramen noodles." Giselle stood in my tiny studio apartment, hands on her hips, surveying the stack of instant noodle packages on my counter. "Girl, this has got to stop." I was hunched over my laptop, scrolling through job listings. "It's not that bad. They're actually pretty good with an egg mixed in." "Nope. Get dressed. We're going to dinner." And I'm not taking no for an answer. That was Giselle, my best friend since college, and the only person who stuck around after Angela's grand theft. While everyone else bought into my sister's poor, unstable Kira narrative, Giselle saw through the act. Over plates of pad thai at our favorite hole-in-the-wall restaurant, she laid out her plan. "My company's hiring for an entry-level marketing position. The pay's decent, and there's room for growth." Marketing. I pushed my food around the plate. Angela always said I'd be terrible at that. Too shy, too awkward. "Angela's full of shit." Giselle cut in sharply. "Remember that fundraiser you organized in college? You killed it." Stop letting her voice live in your head rent-free. She was right. Angela had always had opinions about my career choices, steering me away from anything she considered her territory. Marketing had been one of them. The next morning, I put on my only professional outfit, a black blazer and pencil skirt I'd bought for Grandma's funeral, and walked into the interview. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. 2 weeks later, I started my new job. "Welcome to Horizon Marketing," Fatima, my supervisor, said warmly. "Let's get you settled in." The work was challenging, but I threw myself into it. Every time I felt like giving up, I'd picture Angela's smug face on Instagram, still posting about her fabulous European adventure with my money. It fueled me. 3 months in, I landed my first client. 6 months in, I got a raise. The ramen noodles were replaced with real groceries, and I started putting away a small amount of savings each month. "Look at you, marketing queen," Giselle cheered one night over wine. "Remember when you couldn't even afford happy hour?" I was about to respond when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. "Turner." "Ignore it," Giselle advised, reaching for my phone. But I'd already answered. "Hello, Kira." His voice was hesitant. I saw you on LinkedIn. Congratulations on the promotion." "Thanks." My voice was ice. "Was that all?" "No, I've been thinking about everything that happened. I should have believed you about Angela." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Funny how everyone's starting to say that now. "Can we meet? Just to talk? I feel terrible about how things ended." Giselle was making frantic hang-up gestures across the table. "I'm seeing someone," I lied smoothly. "And I'm doing great, Turner. Really great. Without you, without Angela, without anyone who chose not to believe me." After I hung up, Giselle raised her glass. "Now that's the Kira I've been waiting to see." But later that night, alone in my apartment, a new one, small, but Angela-free, I allowed myself to cry. Not because I missed Turner, but because I was finally starting to recognize my own strength. My phone pinged with a notification. Another Instagram post from Angela, but something was different. The smile seemed forced. The designer outfit had been posted before, and the location tag was mysteriously absent. Living my best life, Faktusak blessed luxury lifestyle. I zoomed in on her face. The makeup was heavy, but couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. Well, I murmured, screenshotting the post. Looks like someone's perfect life might not be so perfect after all. My doorbell rang, startling me. It was nearly midnight, too late for visitors. Through the peephole, I saw Giselle, holding a folder. "You need to see this," she said, as I opened the door. "Remember my cousin, who works at that fancy hotel in Paris? She just sent me some interesting information about our dear Angela." I took the folder, my heart racing. Maybe karma wasn't just a nice idea after all. Maybe it was about to become my favorite word. But first, I needed to decide. Did I want to watch my sister's carefully constructed house of cards collapse on its own? Or did I want to be the one to blow it down? Looking at the folder in my hands, I smiled. For the first time since Angela left, it felt like I had choices. And this time, I wouldn't be the one getting burned. The photos in Giselle's folder told a story Angela's Instagram followers would never see. My sister arguing with hotel staff, Angela being escorted out of luxury boutiques, a series of bounce checks from increasingly cheaper hotels. "She's burning through the money faster than a California wildfire," Giselle said, pointing to the dates. "And that's not all. Look at this." The last photo showed Angela leaving a pawn shop, clutching a familiar velvet box, Grandma's pearls. Before I could process this, my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. "Kira," his voice sounded older, tired. "Do you have a minute?" "Depends. Are you calling to defend Angela again?" "No, he cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology, a big one." I sat down hard on my couch, Giselle squeezing my free hand in support. "I got a call from the bank," Dad continued, "about some irregularities with Angela's power of attorney documents. They're saying some signatures might have been forged." "You don't say," I replied dryly. "I should have listened to you. I should have." His voice cracked. "Can I come see you, please?" 20 minutes later, he was at my door, looking smaller than I remembered. His eyes took in my new apartment, lingering on the wall of achievement certificates from work. "Marketing," he said, reading one of them. "But Angela always said." "Angela says a lot of things, Dad. Most of them aren't true." He sank into my armchair, head in his hands. "I've been such a fool. Your Aunt Carol called yesterday. She ran into Angela's old roommate from Paris. Apparently, Angela was asked to leave their apartment months ago. Something about stolen jewelry and unpaid rent. And let me guess, now nobody can reach her?" He nodded miserably. "Her phone's disconnected. Her last Instagram post was 2 weeks ago. I keep thinking about what you tried to tell me." "Stop," I cut him off. "I don't need your guilt right now. What I needed was your support back then." I know. He pulled out an envelope. "I've been saving. It's not much, but it's a start toward what you should have inherited." I stared at the envelope. 6 months ago, I would have grabbed it desperately. Now, "Keep it," I said. "I'm doing fine on my own." His eyes welled up. "You are, aren't you, despite everything I did?" Giselle, who'd been quietly observing, spoke up. "Mr. Sutton, Kira has a meeting early tomorrow. Maybe we should wrap this up." Dad stood, understanding the dismissal. At the door, he turned back. "If you hear from her, will you let me know she's okay?" "Sure, Dad." I managed a small smile. "But I'm not the sister you need to worry about anymore." After he left, Giselle poured us both a glass of wine. "You okay?" "Better than okay." I pulled out my laptop. "Help me track down Angela's old roommate. I want to hear exactly what happened in Paris." 3 days and several international phone calls later, we had our answer. Angela's European dream had crumbled months ago. The inheritance money was gone, spent on luxury hotels, designer clothes, and what her roommate described as a gambling problem that got way out of hand. She borrowed money from some scary people, the roommate told me. Then one night, she just disappeared, left all her stuff behind. I was about to close my laptop when an email notification popped up. The subject line made my blood freeze. Little sister, I need your help. Don't open it, Giselle warned, but I already had. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm in trouble. Real trouble. You're the only one I can trust. Please don't tell Dad, but I'm back in the town. Can we meet? I'll explain everything. Delete it, Giselle said firmly. After everything she did. Wait. I stared at the screen. A plan forming. Maybe this is exactly what we've been waiting for. Kira, no, whatever you're thinking. She took everything from me, Giselle. My inheritance, my family's trust, my dignity. I started typing a reply. Now she wants my help? Fine. But this time, we're playing by my rules. I hit send on my response. Coffee shop on 5th Street. Tomorrow at 2. Don't be late. Giselle groaned. I know that look. What are you planning? I closed my laptop with a smile. Let's just say Karma's about to get a little help from her friends. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop early, wearing my sharpest business suit and Angela's favorite shade of red lipstick. Time to show my big sister exactly who the unstable one was now. The woman who walked into the coffee shop was barely recognizable as my sister. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. Angela wore wrinkled jeans and a faded sweater, her once immaculate blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, poorly concealed by drugstore makeup. Kira, she breathed, sliding into the seat across from me. You look amazing. I know. I pushed a coffee toward her. Black, 2 sugars, unless your taste has changed along with your circumstances. Her hand shook slightly as she reached for the cup. You always remembered how I take my coffee. Funny how I can remember things about you, but you couldn't remember basic human decency. She flinched. I deserve that. You deserve a lot more than that. I leaned back, crossing my legs. But I'm curious, what kind of trouble are you in that's bad enough to bring you crawling back to your unstable little sister? Angela glanced around nervously before leaning in. I made some mistakes in Paris, borrowed money from the wrong people. They followed me back here. How much? 50,000 euros. She stared into her coffee. They're giving me 2 weeks to pay it back, or she swallowed hard. Let's just say they were very graphic about the consequences. And the inheritance money? Gone. A tear slipped down her cheek. All of it. The gambling, the shopping. I thought I could win it back. I even sold Grandma's pearls. I took a slow sip of my latte. And now you want my help? I know I don't deserve it. She reached across the table, but I pulled my hand away. But you're my sister, my only family who might still help me. That's rich, considering how you treated your only family when you had the upper hand. I was wrong, she whispered. So wrong, about everything. You were always the strong one, the smart one. I was just jealous. Jealous, I laughed sharply. You stole my inheritance, turned our family against me, and destroyed my relationship. All because you were jealous. You had everything I wanted, her voice cracked. Dad's respect, Grandma's love, real friends like Giselle. I just had appearances. A waitress approached to refill our coffees. I waited until she left before responding. And now you have nothing. Angela nodded miserably. I'm staying at a motel off Highway 9. I can barely afford that. These men, they know where I am. They've been watching me. Sounds scary, I said coolly. Almost as scary as having your entire support system ripped away by someone you trusted. Please, she whispered. I know I can't fix what I did, but I need help. I need my sister. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. You're right about one thing. You can't fix what you did, but lucky for you, I'm not like you. I'll help. Hope bloomed in her eyes. Really? You can stay with me. Oh, Kira, thank you. I'm not finished. I cut her off. You'll stay with me, but on my terms. You'll get a job. Any job, even if it's cleaning toilets. Every penny you earn goes toward your debt. You'll sign a legal document giving up any remaining claim to Grandma's estate. And you'll tell Dad and the family the complete truth about everything. She paled. But they'll hate me. Welcome to my world. I grabbed my purse. Those are my terms. Take them, or go back to your motel and wait for your friends to find you. Angela wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll do it. Good, get your things and come to this address by 6. I handed her a slip of paper. Don't be late, and don't make me regret this. As I walked toward the door, she called out, "Why are you helping me, after everything I did?" I turned back, meeting her desperate gaze, because watching you build yourself back up from nothing, on my terms, is going to be so much more satisfying than watching you destroy yourself. Outside, Giselle was waiting in her car. How'd it go? She took the bait. I buckled my seatbelt. Call your lawyer friend. We need those documents ready by 6. Are you sure about this? I smiled, thinking of Angela's fallen face when I laid out my terms. Oh, I'm sure. The prodigal sister's about to learn what real karma feels like. But as we drove away, I couldn't shake the image of her trembling hands on that coffee cup. Was I really helping her, or was I just becoming a different version of her? I pushed the thought away. She made her choices. Now it was time for her to face the consequences. Under my roof, under my rules. At exactly 5:59 p.m., Angela knocked on my door, carrying a single battered suitcase and a designer handbag that had seen better days. Your palace awaits, I said, gesturing to the small guest room. Really just an office with a fold-out couch. Bathrooms down the hall. We share. Her eyes darted around my apartment, taking in the modest furnishings. It's nice. Amazing what honest work can buy, isn't it? I handed her a stack of papers. Sign these. She flipped through them slowly. A formal confession about the inheritance fraud. Kira, if I sign this, you could go to jail? Yeah, that's the point. Consider it insurance against any future schemes. I tapped the papers. Sign, or there's the door. Her hand trembled as she signed each page. One more thing. I pulled out a basic flip phone. Your new phone. No social media, no fancy apps, just calls and texts. But my Instagram is dead, just like your old life. I crossed my arms. Tomorrow you start your new job. You found me a job already. Giselle's cousin manages a cleaning service. You start at 7 a.m. The horror on her face was almost comical. Cleaning, but I've never done an honest day's work in your life? I know. Time to learn. That night, I heard her crying through the thin walls. Part of me wanted to comfort her. We'd shared a room as kids, and her tears had always been my weakness. But that was before she'd betrayed me, before she'd stolen everything. The next morning, I found her struggling with the coffee maker. Here, I said, reaching past her to press the right buttons. Like this. Thanks. She hesitated. Kira, about those men. They're really dangerous. What if they find me here? Already handled. I poured coffee into a travel mug. Giselle's brother's a cop. He's aware of the situation. You thought of everything, didn't you? Unlike you, I plan ahead. I handed her the mug. Your uniform's on the couch. Don't be late. She came home that night, looking shell-shocked, her uniform stained with cleaning products. Rough day? I asked, not looking up from my laptop. I cleaned 11 bathrooms. She collapsed onto the couch. My hands are raw. Builds character. The woman in 4B yelled at me because I didn't fold her toilet paper into a triangle. She laughed suddenly, a hollow sound. God, I used to be that woman. Used to be, being the operative phrase. The next few days fell into a routine. Angela would leave early, come home late, and deposit her paycheck directly into an account I'd set up for her debt. She didn't complain much. Then came Sunday dinner with Dad. You look different, he said, when Angela opened the door. No designer clothes or fake smile, she replied quietly. This is what rock bottom looks like, Dad. Over pasta that Angela had helped cook, another new skill she was learning. She told him everything. The forged documents, the gambling, the stolen jewelry. I'm so ashamed, she finished, tears streaming down her face. Of all of it. But mostly of how I treated Kira. Dad sat in stunned silence for a long moment. I don't even know who you are anymore. Neither do I, she whispered. But I'm trying to find out. After he left, Angela turned to me. Are you enjoying this, watching me humiliate myself? Honestly, less than I thought I would. I started clearing the dishes. Help me with these. As we washed dishes side by side, she spoke softly. Remember when we used to do this at Grandma's? You'd wash, I'd dry, and we'd make up stories about our future lives. Yeah, funny how none of those stories involved you stealing my inheritance and running off to Paris. She flinched. I deserve that. You deserve a lot worse. I handed her a plate to dry. But maybe you also deserve a chance to prove you can change. Why are you really helping me, Kira? The truth this time. I thought about it as I scrubbed a particularly stubborn pot, because watching you struggle through honest work, face your mistakes, actually earn your way back, that's better than any revenge I could have planned. And the men I owe money to? We'll figure it out. But we do it my way, no shortcuts, no schemes. She nodded, carefully drying a wine glass. Thank you for not being like me. Don't thank me yet, I warned. Tomorrow you're cleaning the gym locker rooms. Her horrified expression made me smile. Maybe this wasn't the sister relationship I'd dreamed of as a kid, but it was something real, built on hard truths instead of easy lies. And watching Angela learn those truths, one bathroom at a time, that was its own kind of justice. Your sister's actually doing pretty well, Giselle's cousin, Maria, reported over lunch. Shows up on time, doesn't complain, clients like her. I nearly choked on my sandwich. Are we talking about the same Angela? 3 weeks in, and she's already got regulars requesting her. Something about her attention to detail. Of course, Angela's perfectionism was finally being put to good use. The same obsessive nature that had made her an expert at manipulation was now being channeled into spotless bathrooms and perfectly organized closets. When I got home that evening, I found Angela scrubbing our kitchen floor on her hands and knees. You know we have a mop, right? Can't get the corners properly with a mop. She sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. Besides, I'm saving up my energy. Tomorrow's my first corporate office cleaning. The law firm? She nodded. Maria says it's a big opportunity. If they like my work, it could mean steady clients, better pay. Well, look who's becoming a responsible adult. Don't sound so surprised. She stood up, wincing. By the way, I calculated the numbers. At this rate, I can pay back about 30% of my debt in 6 months. And the other 70%. Her face fell. I'm working on it. Maybe if I pick up some weekend shifts. A sharp knock at the door cut her off. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in expensive suits. Angela, one called out. We know you're in there. Time to talk about our money. The color drained from Angela's face. Oh God, they found me. Bathroom, I whispered, pushing her toward the hall. Lock the door. Don't come out until I call you. Once she was hidden, I opened the door, keeping the security chain on. Can I help you? The taller man smiled without warmth. We're looking for Angela, business matter. Haven't seen her in months. Not since Paris, actually. Have you tried her Instagram? Cute, the shorter one growled. Listen, we know she's staying here. Tell her she's got 3 days to pay up, or things get ugly. Is that a threat? Just business. The tall one slipped a card through the gap. Make sure she gets the message. After they left, I found Angela huddled in the bathtub, shaking. They're going to kill me, she whispered. No, they're not. I pulled out my phone. Because we're calling the police. They'll just deny everything. It's my word against theirs, and I have no proof. Actually, I smiled grimly. You do. Remember that confession you signed? The one detailing all your illegal activities in Paris, including who you borrowed money from. Her eyes widened. You knew they'd come here eventually. I told you, I plan ahead. I dialed Giselle's brother's number. Time to let the professionals handle this. 2 hours later, we sat in a police station, giving statements. Turns out, our visitors were already known to Interpol for running illegal gambling operations across Europe. We've been building a case against them, the detective explained. Your sister's statement could be very helpful. Angela looked at me. Did you plan this too? Set me up to help take them down? No, but I'm not complaining about the outcome. I handed her a tissue. Consider it your first step toward actual redemption. Later that night, as we shared a pizza on my living room floor, Angela said quietly, I found an evening job, reception at a gym. Between that and the cleaning, maybe I can pay them back faster. The police said not to worry about the debt. It was illegal anyway. Not them. She met my eyes. You, Dad, everyone I hurt. I want to make it right. Before I could respond, someone knocked on the door again. This time, when I checked the peephole, I saw a familiar face that made my stomach drop. It's Turner, I told Angela. What's he doing here? She suddenly looked guilty. I might have run into him at the gym. He might have mentioned wanting to apologize again. You didn't. He really seems sorry, Kira, and he's been helping me with job leads. And, stop, I held up my hand. Just stop. You don't get to play matchmaker, not after everything. I'm not. She sighed. I'm trying to fix things, all the things I broke. Another knock. Kira, I know you're home. Please, can we talk? I looked at Angela, then at the door, feeling the weight of choices. Trust was like a broken mirror. You could piece it back together, but you'd always see the cracks. Was I ready to risk cutting myself again? 2 minutes, I called through the door. That's all you get. As I reached for the handle, I caught Angela's reflection in the window, a small, hopeful smile playing on her lips. Maybe some things really could be fixed. Maybe some cracks were worth the risk. But first, I had a very uncomfortable conversation waiting on the other side of that door. Turner stood in my doorway, looking exactly like he had the day he'd walked away, unfairly handsome and irritatingly nervous. You cut your hair, he said. You're down to 1 minute and 50 seconds. He ran a hand through his own hair. Right. Look, I've been doing a lot of thinking. That must have been painful. I deserve that. He shifted uncomfortably. I should have believed you about Angela, about everything. Yes, you should have. I crossed my arms. Is that all? No, actually. He pulled out his phone. Remember Julia from the Paris office? She sent me something interesting. My heart skipped. Julia, the colleague who'd helped Angela set up her European bank accounts. Show her, Angela called from behind me. I turned to glare at her. You knew about this. Just watch, she said quietly. Turner played a video. It showed Angela in a Paris casino, clearly drunk, bragging loudly about how she'd tricked her family. Stupid little sister, video Angela slurred. Actually signed everything over. They all bought it. Daddy, the lawyers, even that idiot boyfriend of hers. I watched as past Angela waved around what looked like forged documents, laughing about how easy it had been. Julia recorded this the night before Angela disappeared from Paris, Turner explained. She sent it to me last week, after hearing Angela was back in town. Why now? I demanded. Why didn't you show anyone this before? Because I was a coward. He put his phone away. Because it was easier to believe Angela's lies than admit I'd been played too. But mostly because I was afraid of losing my job. Julia and I were supposed to verify all Angela's paperwork. We failed, completely. Angela stepped forward. Tell her the rest. Turner nodded. I've submitted the video to the police and the family lawyer. With this evidence, they can reverse everything. Get your inheritance back. I felt dizzy. What? The money's gone, Angela added quickly. But the legal rights, the property, Grandma's heirlooms, everything I haven't sold can be returned to you. You knew about this? I turned to Angela. For how long? A week. She looked down. Turner showed me the video at the gym. I asked him to wait. I wanted to prove I was really changing first. By cleaning toilets? By being honest, by earning trust back. She met my eyes. I didn't want you to think I was just trying to escape consequences again. I sank onto the couch, processing. So all this time, while you've been scrubbing floors, I knew there was proof of what I did. Yes, Angela sat beside me, and I knew it would come out eventually. But I needed to show you, show everyone, that I could be better, that I am better. The video doesn't change anything, Turner added, but maybe it helps set things right. I looked between them, my ex-boyfriend, who'd failed me, my sister, who'd betrayed me, both standing there offering pieces of redemption I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. Get out, I said to Turner. Kira, the videos with the police, that's good, thank you, now get out. After he left, Angela touched my arm. Are you okay? No. I stood up, pacing. Do you know what the worst part is? I was actually starting to believe you'd changed, that this was real. It is real. She grabbed my hands. The video, the inheritance, that's just legal stuff. This? She gestured around the apartment. Me, learning to be a real sister, a better person, that's real. How can I believe that? How can I believe anything? Because I'm still here, her voice cracked. Because I could have run when those men showed up. Could have run when Turner showed me the video. But I stayed. I'm staying. Why? Because you're my sister. Because I love you. Because I finally understand what that means. I pulled my hands away. I need some air. Want company? No. I grabbed my keys. I need to think. Alone. Outside, the night air was cool on my face. My phone buzzed. Giselle, probably checking in. Another text from Turner. I ignored both. Instead, I opened my photos, scrolling back to an old picture of Angela and me as kids, matching gap-toothed grins at Grandma's house. We'd been happy then, real. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Angela. Whatever you decide, I meant what I said. I'm not running anymore. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, probably cleaning something. Despite everything, I smiled. Maybe that was the difference. The old Angela would have chased me, manipulated me, forced a resolution on her terms. This Angela was letting me choose. And somehow, that meant more than any video confession or legal redemption ever could. I turned back toward home, toward my sister, toward whatever came next. We had a lot to figure out, but at least now we were doing it honestly. You missed a spot, I said, pointing to a dusty corner of the display case. Angela rolled her eyes, but dutifully wiped it clean. You know, when I agreed to help you open this boutique, I didn't realize you'd be such a demanding boss. Karma's funny that way. I adjusted a vintage necklace in the window display. Besides, you're not just helping, you're part owner. The bell above the door chimed as Giselle walked in, carrying coffee. The sign looks amazing. Sisters Vintage and Estate Jewelry. Very classy. Unlike that time Angela tried to pawn Grandma's pearls, I teased. Never letting that go, are you? Angela accepted a coffee from Giselle. Nope. But at least we got them back. I touched the pearls at my neck. Our first successful recovery from Angela's European adventure. The boutique had been my idea. After the legal dust settled and the inheritance was rightfully restored, I realized something. I didn't want to just take back what was mine. I wanted to build something new, something that could heal old wounds while creating something beautiful. The bell chimed again. Dad walked in, carrying a familiar wooden box. Found this in the attic, he said, setting it down carefully. Your grandmother's jewelry box. Thought it belonged here. Angela's hands trembled as she opened it. I remember this. She used to let us try everything on, tell us stories about each piece. Now we can do the same for others, I said. Help people create their own stories. Speaking of stories, Giselle interrupted. Your ex is outside looking pathetic again. I glanced out the window. Turner stood across the street, pretending to check his phone. He's been coming by every day this week, Angela said softly. Maybe. Don't. I turned away from the window. Some stories don't need sequels. Fair enough. She pulled out a small velvet pouch. Which reminds me, I have something for you. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. One I recognized instantly. Mom's charm bracelet, I whispered. But you lost this years ago. I didn't lose it. I sold it. She looked down. In Paris, when things got bad. But I tracked it down, took most of my savings, but, she shrugged, some things are worth more than money. I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, the familiar charms tinkling. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm just returning what was always yours. Dad cleared his throat. Girls, there's something else. He pulled out an envelope. Your grandmother left this with her lawyer. Instructions were to open it if you ever worked together. The letter inside was written in Grandma's elegant hand. My dearest girls, if you're reading this, you've finally learned what I always knew. You're stronger together than apart. The jewelry is just metal and stones. The real inheritance is the bond between you. Take care of it. It's worth more than all the pearls in the world. Love, Grandma. She knew, Angela said quietly. She knew we'd either destroy each other or find our way back. She bet on us finding our way back, I smiled. Even when we couldn't see it ourselves. The bell chimed again. Our first real customer walked in, admiring the displays. Welcome to Sisters, Angela and I said in unison, then laughed at our synchronization. As Angela showed the customer our collection, I watched her interact, genuine, professional, proud of her knowledge. No manipulation, no shortcuts, just honest work and earned confidence. Dad squeezed my shoulder. Your grandmother would be proud of both of you. Even after everything? Especially after everything. He nodded toward Angela. Sometimes the longest road leads exactly where you needed to go. I touched Mom's bracelet, felt Grandma's pearls at my throat, and watched my sister, my real sister, not the facade she'd hidden behind for so long, build something honest and new. The customer left with a vintage ring and a smile. Angela turned to me, beaming. First sale. First of many, I corrected. Ready to build this legacy the right way. Together, she held out her hand. I took it, squeezing firmly. Together. Outside, life moved on. Turner finally walked away. Somewhere in Paris, some angry men were facing justice. And here, in this small boutique, filled with history and hope, two sisters who'd lost their way had finally found their path back to each other. Not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through small acts of trust, through honest work and earned forgiveness, through choosing every day to be better than we were yesterday. Hey, Angela called from the back room. Help me with these boxes. I smiled. Coming, sis. Some revenge stories end in destruction, but sometimes, if you're lucky, they end in reconstruction instead. And that's a much better story to tell.